All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Master Strategy for Reaching Muslims. This is my first week because I missed last week. I was traveling. How many of you were here last week? Just so I get a feel for most of you were. Okay. Greg was here. That's a good thing. All right, welcome back. Alex is here too. So appreciate you guys being here. I'm sure there will be a few more stragglers that come in. This is a fantastic opportunity, and I heard a lot of great comments after the session last week. For those that missed it, there is the video version of this available. Where can we find that, Eric? Where can people access it?
We sent it out to people who were here last week.
Okay.
We'll send it out. Just make sure you registered. Even if you haven't now, still do that. That way you'll get on the list.
Okay. So
Share it on Sunday as well.
check your inbox. If you're registered, you should be able to find that there. If you have problems with that, just check with us and we'll make sure you get a link so that you can go and watch it. And you may want to share it with some people as well. Greg Armstrong, I've known not that long, but we've had some good conversations. It's always stimulating as we're talking about this stuff. Greg is a pastor of Saturate Church, which is with the Fellowship Baptists, I believe. Yep. So where are you guys meeting now?
In homes.
In homes?
So
yeah.
I don't want to publicize.
So find them if you can. You can always talk with Greg if you want to know more about that. But we really appreciate his partnership. And one of the things that we've determined as a church is that we want to get better at reaching different faith groups. We're here in the GTA, and if you're not doing that, you've really got a very small number of people that you can reach. So we want to get better at this, and Greg has agreed to help us with that. So we're really happy that he's back. I'm not going to delay. Let's take a second and pray, and then we'll let Greg get right into it. A lot of stuff to cover today. Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for just people like Greg and Alex that do a lot of work to understand these different faiths and want to help other Christians understand how to communicate their own faith better and to compare and to really be prepared, Lord, to share your word. This is kind of a high-level thinking here, and it's challenging. So thank you for everyone that's made the point of being here and that is up for this challenge. And I pray that you would just give Greg just clarity of thought as he goes through these things that he's prepared today. I know he's put a lot of work in over a number of years to prepare these materials. So thank you for his effort here, and I pray that you would really bless our session today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Bartley and Renew Church, for hosting this our second session, which, yes, is very vital that you watch the first session. This is not, I'm not going to recap too much. I'm just going to really summarize the essential points that we did last time to make sure if you are only joining us today and you didn't get to catch up with last week, that you have at least some footing for what we're doing today. Okay, so you should all have a handout as well. So if you don't have a handout, make sure you grab it. It's at the wall over there. Put up your hand if you need it. All right, so this is actually your handout. So if you go to this page, which is page 3, you'll see pretty much a summary of the steps of the approach, like the stages. Okay, so just a big picture where we started what we were doing last time was introducing a very different kind of strategy approach to reaching Muslims and emphasizing this is a strategy. This is not just a couple points or topics to talk about with Muslims. That's not this approach. This is a strategy, a step-by-step. This is where you begin. These are the next points you go through in order. And so this is what we're introducing. So we began introducing it last week, but just to remind us where we are in that process, you can see, if I zoom in, maybe you can see. Okay, so the first main stage is we can deconstruct, and the second main stage is we reconstruct. So the biggest part of it is really deconstructing. We are deconstructing the Qur'an, the authority in Islam, before we can introduce a biblical faith in a way that they can actually hear it and potentially receive it. It's up to them if they receive it. but we want to break down all potential barriers for them to hear it out and like really actually consider it. And so where we need to start is with dismantling or deconstruction. That is like, I don't know, 99% of what we need to do. This is the hard work that is particular, like specific to Islam. As I mentioned, we would do that with any other religion. We have to deconstruct the authority if the person is submitting to an authority. Okay, in Islam, that is especially the Qur'an and Muhammad. So that's what we're going to focus on is the Qur'an, and we focus on using the Torah or Old Testament, not the New Testament. Very, very key is we do not talk about New Testament issues. We're not going to defend the New Testament. We're not going to try to defend Christian theology about Jesus or the Trinity or the atonement or anything like that until we've deconstructed the Quran. And next also, in the reconstructing category, so after we've deconstructed the Quran, we are going to relay 5 new pillars. So we deconstruct 5 pillars. Now we're going to reconstruct a new set of 5 pillars, and 4 of those pillars, the first 4, is Old Testament. So the last one is the gospel. Gospel is the very last thing we get to, and that has to be last. Otherwise, they won't be able to hear it out. Okay? So that's what we want to emphasize. We're going to use Old Testament first to deconstruct the Quran and then reestablish the foundations of the Bible, and then we're going to go to the gospel finally. And then from there, you know, someone might not immediately accept the gospel and the Bible. So maybe now we're going to answer their questions that they have at that point. But from that point on, it should not be coming from an Islamic perspective. So if they have questions about, you know, historicity of things in the Bible or objections to the Bible that are not coming from an Islamic point of view, that's perfectly fine. We can do that at that stage. But that is now we call general apologetics. Okay, so not stuff specific to Islam. If they're still dealing with Islamic objections at that point, certainly we should have been hearing them before. We should not actually be at that stage because we should be going back then and deconstructing still. Because any objections coming from that point of view means they're still relying on the Quran. Okay, so always if they're bringing up stuff at a later stage, it means you didn't do enough at the earlier stage and you need to go back. Okay. Okay, so let's come to where we are, where we left off last time, which was, let's read the pillars at least, okay? So the first pillar that we deconstructed last time was, this is the statement we deconstructed, the Bible, or specifically because we're only going to talk about the Torah, we're not going to talk about the Bible in general, that the Torah was corrupted. Okay, so that's the first claim they're making. We deconstruct that, and we use the Quran as our ally, actually, in this case. And so from that, and then we use the Dead Sea Scrolls. We could use other manuscripts if we want as well. Pillar 2, the author of the Quran and the author of the Torah is the same author. That's the claim of the Quran, that both books came from God. And so what's the story? Somebody just tell me, who was it about? Okay, what was the story we used to deconstruct that point?
Joseph. Jacob and Joseph.
Jacob and Joseph. And what was the article of clothing that's really important in that story?
The coat.
Yeah, the bloody coat or shirt, okay, of Joseph that's presented to Jacob, and Jacob's response is completely opposite in the Quran versus in the Torah. Okay, so we see that the story is told completely opposite ways. This doesn't come from the same mind. It's not the same author. But the Quran says it's the same author. Therefore, the Quran is wrong on that point, right? So that's essentially, we did that. And then the third pillar we did kind of in overtime last time. A couple people had to head out. We stayed a little longer. So you must go back and watch it. If you were not here, but let me just kind of recap what the story was about that we were comparing, because it's actually going to be the same story for the next pillar. We ended with pillar 3. We're going to pick up with pillar 4, but it's the same story. Okay, so just to recap pillar 3 quickly, we asked them a question for the third pillar. The claim is Abraham traveled to Mecca with Ishmael, and together they built the Kaaba. Okay, Abraham and Ishmael traveled to Mecca and built the Kaaba. That's their claim, and that is the most important pillar, I would say the most important claim that Islam makes. So if we can deconstruct that, it crumbles the whole thing. And let me ask you guys who were here last time, what is the essential story that we're comparing that's in both? Like what's the parallel story? What's it about? I'm not asking you to retell me the whole Islamic version, but yeah. Hagar and Ishmael and Abraham when they left, when they separated. Get that in your head. Okay, when Abraham was separated from Hagar and Ishmael. It's not Ishmael versus Isaac. Okay, we don't talk about that issue because it's not really relevant. It's a distraction. So we're talking about Ishmael going to Mecca, or didn't he? Okay, so we asked the question, do you believe Abraham and Ishmael traveled to Mecca and built the Kaaba? And every Muslim is going to answer yes, because this is part of, oh, this is not showing. Let me go back here. Here we go. We asked that question. Okay, and that'll be in your handout, page
14.
Thank you. Okay, page 14. You see a picture of a woman carrying a jar on her shoulder. Yeah. Okay, so do you believe they traveled to Mecca and built the Kaaba? Okay, that's the key question. Okay, and we can see where Mecca is. Here. Okay, make sure you know where it is. So Mecca, that's the Kaaba. These are the sources we used last time. So key thing is the Hadith. Okay, Hadith is we used from the collection called Sahih al-Bukhari. Hadith number 3364. Okay, and I'm just going to summarize the story for you so we make sure we understand the essentials. And this is actually what I would tell you. It's, as you probably found last time, it was very long reading it. Okay, it's a long hadith. You need to read it. That's why I read it to you. Okay, and I actually even skipped the part about the two wives. But you need to be able to retell the story, the different elements of it. And that's actually what I do when I'm talking with Muslims normally, unless they make me go to the text, which has maybe happened once. Okay, I'll just say, because at this point we've gone through the first two pillars. The Qur'an affirms the Torah in the time of Muhammad, and the Dead Sea Scrolls affirm it also, obviously, before Muhammad. And then the second point about this story with Joseph. And now we're going to do a third stage. So I'm going to say, okay, let me go to another story. We're going to compare. And for the sake of time, let me summarize it for you, and you tell me if I get anything wrong. Okay, so I'm not coming at it from an arrogant point of view. I'm going to retell it, and they're going to know at least the essential parts of the story. They don't always know all the details that I'm going to share. But essentially, the story is, as I said, this is the separation of Hagar and Ishmael from Abraham. And the Islamic account says that Abraham traveled with them and brought them, presumably from Canaan, down to Mecca. And at that time, Mecca was a barren valley. Nobody lived there. And he brought down Hagar and their infant son, Ishmael, who was, it says, a nursing infant. And he brought them down to Mecca. Nobody lives there. There's no well that's open. And he brings them to the spot where the Kaaba eventually will be built by them. Okay, it's not built, at least not fully there yet. And brings them there, drops them off, and heads back to Canaan. Okay, so it's a barren wilderness. Nobody lives around. They're going to die unless God intervenes. So God intervenes, and this is when God intervenes is after Hagar runs back and forth 7 times from the two opposite ends of the valley to 2 different hills called Marwa and Safa. Okay, this is a ritual called Sa'i in the Hajj pilgrimage that's reenacted by Muslims every time that they go there for the Hajj pilgrimage. So this is an essential feature of their religion. And then when she stops after 7 times, she realizes they're going to die of thirst. So God sends an angel, the angel Gabriel, to then dig open a well called the Zamzam well. And so now they're rescued. Now, the next part of the story in the same hadith is that there's a tribe in the area, in the region passing by, called the tribe of?
Something.
You got to know the name.
The Meccans?
No.
It starts with a K, doesn't it?
Nope. Jurhum. Okay, Jurhum. Make sure you remember these things, okay? Otherwise, you got to read it, okay, to them, okay? So the tribe of Jurhum, and they spot birds circling in the air in the distance, so they send scouts over to find out what's over there. Then they stumble upon Hagar and baby Ishmael at the well, and they realize, oh, there's a well here, and let's go get our people and bring them over there and move in and live here, because now we can actually live here. And so they do, and this actually becomes the foundation for the civilization of Mecca. Were this story not to have happened, then the whole origin story of Mecca would not be as Islam says, right? And so they live there with Hagar and Ishmael. So Ishmael from infancy is brought up in this Arab tribe, Jurhum. It's an Arab tribe, because it says that, goes on to say that they teach the boy Arabic, the language of Arabic, so they're Arabs. And then he, at the age of puberty, marries into the tribe, a woman from the tribe of Jurhum, so an Arab woman, and of course they're going to have children, right? So he has Arab children in the Islamic narrative because he married an Arab woman, right? And then I also told you about the two wives. You can skip that part when you're telling them, but essentially years later, when Ishmael is in his second marriage, presumably in his 20s, Abraham finally comes back and visits his son that he left behind, and Allah orders them to build the Kaaba together. So they build the Kaaba. So that is the hadith. That's the story. And that's the story that we're going to compare with Genesis 21. And you can see on the screen the verses that are listed. Those are essential verses. So the context we look at is first in Genesis 17, 23 to 25, where it tells us how old, and I'm going to ask you guys, how old was Abraham when he was circumcised?
99.
99. And how old was Ishmael? 13. And it happened on the same day, right? Okay, so that's key information. Also, where were they living?
Canaan.
In Canaan, but more specifically?
Gaza?
Okay, that's good. You remember, in that area, it wasn't called Gaza, it's Gerar. Okay, it's near Gaza. So in 20 verse 1, it tells us that they were sojourning in Gerar. Okay, so that gives us the geography. So those are two key things, because we need to know the age of Ishmael, and we need to know where they lived to understand chapter 21. And as I told you last time, the key passage and easy to remember is Genesis 21, 1 to 21. Okay, 21, 21 essentially. And I told you last time for this pillar, for this part of the story, we're only looking at up to verse 19. The next two verses, 20 and 21, is for the next pillar. Okay, so we're going to use the same hadith for this pillar, the third pillar, whether they traveled to Mecca and built the Kaaba, and the fourth pillar, which is going to be the issue about whether Ishmael was the father of the Arabs in the region of Mecca, and whether Muhammad was an Ishmaelite. Okay, that's the fourth pillar. So we're not going to reread all that. And remind us of the maps. And you should have these maps in your handout as well. So Gerar, as I pointed out, is near, I don't know if I can zoom in on this. You got it on your handout. Okay, Gerar near the Gaza region, and who walks in the biblical narrative? Who goes on the journey?
Abraham.
No.
No. Hagar and Ishmael.
Hagar and Ishmael. Okay, Abraham definitely, that's the one guy who doesn't go on the journey, okay, in the biblical narrative. Okay, and remember, this is the map of Abraham's journey is in the Torah, not in that story, because he doesn't, I forget who said it, it might have been Darcy, said, I asked, how far did Abraham travel? And he said, to the kitchen. Okay, he went to get the food, to like the water and the bread, and to give to them, to hand off to them, to send them away, right? And it says in Genesis 21, verse 14, he sends them off, and then she wanders in the wilderness of Beersheba, right? Beersheba, that's not near Mecca. So I always point out this map is a good map to show all the places Abraham went in Genesis. and from Ur to Haran in Syria, down to Canaan, to Egypt, back to Canaan. Okay, that's like that geography you need to know. And you should know that anyway, because it's pretty essential in the Bible. Actually, this should highlight to us, we need to know our Bible better, right? Okay. And some of these details that you never thought were important now become of utmost importance. So this is the Islamic narrative, that Abraham traveled with Ishmael and Hagar and brought them down to Mecca, 1,350 kilometers south each way, and went back. How many days journey, camel journey, was it for him that I mentioned last time? 40 each way. So that's the Islamic map and the Islamic Atlas. You can see they add on that leg of the journey. And then these were the conclusions from the third pillar. According to the Torah, did Abraham and Ishmael travel to Mecca? According to the Torah, did they build the Kaaba? Who built the Kaaba if not Abraham and Ishmael?
The Arabs.
Pagan.
Thank you. Pagans. Okay, fourth pillar. Yeah.
So I think it might help to bring it a little bit, just a tiny bit more. We often talk when we're talking about that Muslims follow the Qur'an. Most of us would know that. The Hadith is less familiar to Christians. Mm-hmm. And when we talked initially about addressing the authority, the focus was the authority of the Qur'an. Because the Qur'an is the one that says, it parallels with the Torah. But now you're talking about the Hadith, and we're comparing not the Qur'an and the Torah, we're comparing the Hadith.
We're doing both. Okay, we're using the Hadith.
You're doing both, but I think what I want you to dig into is help people understand how the Hadith relates to the Qur'an.
Yeah, okay. So in your handout for Pillar 3, page 14. I hope I have it in there. Yeah, okay. So Surah 14, verse 37. And by the way, you should have on your phones pulled up Quran.com also. Okay, so you're ready to go and look up verses. So Surah 14, verse 37. If your neighbor was not here last time, be a friendly neighbor and help orient them to get to the website and everything. Verse 14, verse 37, I said, right? Okay, it says, Our Lord, I have settled, so this is Abraham speaking. So this is in the Quran, chapter 14, verse 37. Abraham says, Our Lord, I have settled some of my offspring in a barren valley near your sacred house. Our Lord, so that they may establish prayer, so make the hearts of believing people inclined towards them, etc. So what is this saying? Abraham settled some of his offspring in a barren valley near the sacred house. Sacred house is the Kaaba. Okay? So that's like unquestioned. This is how every Muslim interprets this verse. So it doesn't tell us, like I said last time, the Quran doesn't tell us the full story of like all the details of the story, but the Hadith fills it in. And the essential elements of the story that we're going by that's non-negotiable is that Abraham traveled with Ishmael and Hagar down to Mecca. He brought them down there and he settled them down there. And he eventually built the Kaaba with Ishmael. Okay? So this is a key verse that shows that he settled them there in a barren valley, which is also an essential part of that Hadith narrative. So the Hadith narrative just helps us tell the story like clearly what was going on. But every aspect really of it is essential that's in the Hadith. That's why I said at the beginning of when I was going to the beginning of this pillar last week, that what's the question we start with? Do you believe that Abraham and Ishmael traveled to Mecca and built the Kaaba? I didn't say, do you trust Sahih al-Bukhari and the Hadith sources? Okay, I asked, do you believe that as a fact? Every Muslim has to say it's a fact, whether they're just relying on the Quran for it or they're relying on the biographical literature of Muhammad called the Sirah literature, or they're relying on the Hadith literature, like we're looking at Sahih Bukhari as a collection of Hadith. Okay? It doesn't really matter. because the essential aspects is there, right? Now, even they're going to say, well, how old was Ishmael? And they want to argue about that. It actually doesn't matter, okay? Because let's say that it's all the same age, okay? Do we still have a contradiction with the Islamic version in the Torah? Of course. Because did Abraham and Ishmael travel to Mecca according to the Torah? Right. Did they build the Kaaba according to Genesis? No. So how old Ishmael was is kind of irrelevant at that point. All right. So, and does that make sense, Darcy, what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay, good. No, I'm glad that you bring it up, because these are, you have to process why we're doing everything that we're doing. And sometimes for the sake of time, I can't explain too much. So just please ask questions along the way. Okay. Yeah, so we're in the fourth pillar. So what page in the handout is that? 19, thank you. Again, in the previous pages from 15 following, I did print out the full hadith there, so you can read it there, and it has the source. And actually, if you get the PDF of it, the sources are hyperlinked. So you can click on it, and it will take you to sunnah.com to that place, okay? So coming to page 19, so here is the pillar. Ishmael was the ancestor of the Arabs in Mecca, specifically the Quraysh tribe. You need to know the tribe that Muhammad was from was called the Quraysh tribe. Frankly, like, if these are very key facts, like so 101 Islam, that you need to know it, or you really can't talk to a Muslim, because you can't kind of pretend to use verses from the Quran and you don't even know Muhammad was from the Quraysh tribe, right? So I'm not trying to belittle you. I'm just trying to say you need to know, like, essential information. So learn exactly the things that are there in the handout that we're using. And the way that we phrase things is refined over time, okay? So that's, learn it, and, if you can improve on it, that's amazing, but you got to learn it first, okay? So Ishmael was the ancestor of the Arabs in Mecca, the Quraysh tribe specifically. So notice that statement doesn't say he is the father of all Arabs everywhere at all time. Because remember, in the hadith, Ishmael marries an Arab woman in the tribe of Jurhum. Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to keep doing this kind of stuff so you drill it in your head. So if he married into an Arab tribe, was he the father of all the Arabs? No, they already existed. So even according to Islamic sources, he's not the father of all Arabs. He marries into it. That's how he has an Arab child. So, and that the second part, the most essential part of this pillar, is that Muhammad was a descendant of Ishmael. Why does Muhammad need to be a descendant of Ishmael? Okay, because it says in the Quran, and I give you a bunch of passages here. We're not going to look them all up, but why don't we look up Surah 2, verses 127 to 129. I don't have it on the screen. You should get kind of used to looking it up anyway. So Surah 2, verse 127 and 129. Again, this is about Abraham and Ishmael. And remember when Abraham raised the foundation of the house, which is the Kaaba, with Ishmael. So see, you don't need the hadith. Okay, but if you're going to read scattered verses around the Quran, that's kind of harder. All right, so he raised the foundation of the house with Ishmael, both praying, "Our Lord, accept this from us. You are indeed all hearing, all knowing. Our Lord, make us both fully submit to you, and from our descendants." Our, plural, means Abraham and Ishmael. So it's not only a descendant of Abraham, but a descendant of Ishmael. From our descendants, a nation that will submit to you. Show us our rituals. What are the rituals? Well, like Sa'i, the Marwa Safa hills going between them 7 times, and the Zamzam well, and etc. Okay? Show us our rituals and turn to us in grace. You are truly the acceptor of repentance, most merciful. Our Lord, here it is, raised from among them. Who's them? the descendants of Abraham and Ishmael. So raise from among the descendants of Abraham and Ishmael a messenger who will recite to them your revelations, teach them the book and wisdom, purify them, etc. Who is that messenger? Muhammad. Raise from Abraham and Ishmael a messenger. Okay, from them. That means also from there, from Mecca. Because it's the descendants in Mecca that's got to come. A messenger who will bring a book. Okay, so the Qur'an is saying Abraham, along with Ishmael, prayed this prayer when they established the Kaaba. Raise from our descendants here a messenger who will bring the book. Okay, so this shows you very clearly that he has to be a descendant both of Abraham and Ishmael. The Quran also says that prophethood was given to Abraham and his descendants. Okay, so that means after Abraham, after Abraham, not before. Before Abraham, there were other people, obviously not descended from Abraham, that were prophets. But after Abraham, prophethood was given to him and his descendants. So for someone to qualify as a true prophet from God, according to Islam, they have to be a descendant from Abraham and one of his descendants. And Islam is only aware of 2 wives. Okay, so it doesn't seem to be aware of the third, Keturah. Okay, but it's aware of Sarah and Hagar. So was Muhammad a descendant of Isaac and Jacob? No. So he's got to be a descendant of Ishmael. Okay, and as the Quran, as we just read, he's got to be a descendant of both of them, not just Abraham, and come from that region. None of this, what I'm saying, is controversial in the least. This is like absolute foundational stuff that Muslims teach all the time. Okay, so what do we look at in Genesis? Genesis 21. Remember, 21:21. And that for this passage is especially the verse we need, but we're going to start at verse 20. Somebody read that for me so I can say my voice. Read it out loud. You can go use your own version if you want, if you don't want to use that. 20 and 21.
And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert in the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt.
Okay. So, 2 things I want you to observe. Where did he live? Paran. Okay, so we're going to come back to that question. Where is the wilderness of Paran? But first, we're going to deal with who did he marry? An Egyptian. And look at exactly how it says it. A wife from the land of Egypt. Not only was she Egyptian, meaning she's not Arab, because Egyptians are not Arabs, especially ancient Egyptians, but she's not from Mecca. Okay? She's not from the tribe of Jurhum. Okay, thank you. We'll all learn it eventually by the end of today. Okay? So she was from the land of Egypt. Okay? So let's go back to our maps. So where did they end up before we got to talking about the wilderness of Paran? Where were they wandering? Beersheba, right? So Beersheba's here. Where's Mecca? Here. Okay? So let's see if I don't have the maps here for Mecca. Okay, but you saw that before. So where is Egypt? Here. Okay? In fact, in ancient times, this technically was part of Egypt too. Okay? But, so it's not that far. In fact, Hagar came from there herself. She's Egyptian. So if you're going to be separated from your husband as Hagar, and now you have how old was Ishmael, by the way, approximately? 17, right? 16 or 17. So not a suckling infant. He's ready to be married. Okay, now he's separated from his father. He doesn't have inheritance. He's got to get married. So she's going to marry him to a foreign people? Like almost more than 1,300 kilometers south to a place she's never been, where they speak a different language. It wasn't very safe to travel on roads back then, remember? She doesn't have a whole retinue of people to travel with. She's now a single divorced woman with Ishmael. They're going to go, obviously it doesn't make any sense. But beyond it being illogical, the Bible the Torah contradicts what the Qur'an is saying, right? So what does she do? She probably travels back and gets an Egyptian woman, and then they go back again, and they live in that region. In fact, this is what we see in Genesis 25. Here it is. 25. If you have your Bibles, please, you can follow along too. Okay, and chapter 25, you want to know this section well. You kind of have to, I always tell people, like, study the passages well. Don't just, because you don't want to just use random verses and not really understand the context. So chapter 25, 1 to 18 is the section. But if you look starting at verse 1, it introduces Abraham marries his third wife, Keturah. This is in context after Sarah has died. Also, obviously, Hagar and Ishmael have been cast out in chapter 21. So he marries this third wife. She has, I think it's 6 children. One of them, if you look in verse 2, is named Midian, which is key to observe. Okay. And then it says in verse 5 and 6, these are key verses, Abraham gave all he had to Isaac, but to the sons of his concubines, plural, concubines. So who would that be? Hagar and Keturah, thank you. Okay, so to the sons of his concubines, meaning to Ishmael and the 6 sons of Keturah, Abraham gave gifts, and while he was still living, he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the east country. Okay, so where was Isaac living? In Canaan? Eastward. Is that east? No. Eastward to the east country. I want you to notice on the map, Midian. Okay, that is very northern Saudi Arabia. That's still like at least 1,000 kilometers north of Mecca. This is very far north still. Okay, so this is important because what we're going to see is actually the Midianites and the Ishmaelites intermix. Okay? So, and of course that makes sense. Abraham sends his other sons who are not the heirs away from his heir, which is Isaac, as it says, and they're going to mix together. Of course, they're distant relatives. Okay, they're going to mix together, stay together. So Ishmaelites and Midianites end up mixing. But before we go into that more, Genesis 25, still same chapter, 12 to 18, gives us the sons of Ishmael. Okay, starting at verse 12, but jump down to verse 18. That's the context, okay, the sons of Ishmael. So they, the sons of Ishmael, settled from Havilah to Shur, which is opposite Egypt, in the direction of Assyria. He settled over against all his kinsmen. Now let's remember those 2 places again. Opposite, where? Egypt. Combine that with verse 6. What direction did they go in? Eastward to the east country. Opposite Egypt. In the direction of Assyria. Okay. Opposite Egypt, eastward to the east country, in the direction of Assyria. It's not like here. Nobody lives here. You go up, around. Okay, based on the geography. So where are the sons of Ishmael settling? Okay, the conclusion is between Midian and here. This is modern-day Jordan. Let's look back at Genesis 37, verse 25. I don't know if we did this verse last time, did we? No. Okay. So this is back in the story of Joseph. These are now, we're going to talk about some corroborating verses. So beyond what the Torah says immediately in the parallel account, We actually have other verses in the Torah and in the rest of the Tanakh, the Old Testament, that actually corroborates the geography and the peoples, which is kind of interesting because I want you to remember where the Muslims are ultimately going to go. They're going to try to say that the Torah was corrupted. So then what we're going to emphasize to them after we show them all the specifics is the specifics. So now you have to say that the Jews changed these specific things. Okay, so the Jews didn't just change the immediate story. They had to find all of the other statements in all of their other books and places in the same book that alluded to the same thing, and they had to bring it all into alignment to be perfectly consistent, because it is. Okay? This shows you they didn't do it. They didn't change it. Okay? So the corroborating verses are very significant for this reason. So in chapter 37, verse 25, this is back in the story of Joseph being thrown in the well and sold into slavery, which, you can do a longer version of Pillar 2, where sometimes I do the whole chapter 37, not just the father's reaction, because it's all completely different. So here you have back in that story, and if you did the longer version, you say, okay, well, we were just looking at this story, so let's go back to the story. And in the same place, what does it say in verse 25? They, that's the brothers of Joseph, sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Now, actually, we could read the next couple verses also. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And I need someone else to read through the next verse. End of 27 and 28.
And his brothers listened to him. Then Midian traders passed by. And they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels.
Okay, now very key to understand is to understand the pronouns, so you understand the verse. When it says they drew him up from the well, this is the brothers. Because the Midianites and the Ishmaelites are the same people. It's just using words interchangeably. It's not because you were introduced to the Ishmaelites passing by. They drew him up, that's the brothers, and sold him to the Ishmaelites, who were also Midianites. If you look in your handout, I listed the other verses there, I believe. Yeah, so if you go down to verse, Darcy, help me out here. Verse 36, the last verse of that chapter, 37.
Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard.
Okay, so who sold him in Egypt?
Midianites.
But it had just said that they sold him to the Ishmaelites. Okay, so if you're going to try to argue that the pronoun for the people who lifted him out of the well was the Ishmaelites, and the Ishmaelites sold him to the Midianites, but or the Midianites sold him to the Ishmaelites, but the Ishmaelites end up selling him. Now help me out one more time, Darcy, 39 verse 1. The reason it goes, you have to skip a chapter because the next chapter is about a totally different story about Judah and Tamar. So the narrative continues in chapter 39 when he was brought down to Egypt. So read that.
Well, now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. Okay,
so who brought him down? According to 37, 36, the last verse of 37, it's the Midianites. Okay? But then it's the Ishmaelites in 39 verse 1. I mean, it's the same people. Okay? So they intermix. Now, that's kind of interesting. Look at the map.
As a evidence of corruption.
How would it be an evidence of the same people?
Mixing up peoples.
Hold on to the. You won't ask the question later. Okay, as we keep going. Okay, so where are they coming from again? According to 37:25. Gilead. Where was Joseph in the well? Was in Dothan. Okay, so they go from Gilead to Dothan to bring him down to Egypt. Technically, the red line should be on the coast. Okay, so they bring him because they're going to bring him down to Egypt. So where were the Ishmaelites coming from? Mecca? No, they weren't. They were living over in modern day Jordan. which is east of the Jordan River. Gilead. They crossed over westward to get to the coast to go down to Egypt. And on their way, they crossed over Dothan. In fact, there's an ancient trade route that goes through there. So it's perfectly consistent. Okay, now we should do the Judges reference next. So Judges 8 verses, you got to look this up. It's not on my PowerPoint. Judges 8 verses 22 to 24. Somebody.
Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian." Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." And Gideon said to them, "Let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earrings from the spoil." They had gold earrings because they were Ishmaelites.
Who were Ishmaelites? The Midianites. Okay? Well, that's interesting. Imagine the Jews were able to think of that reference to change it. Okay, like, why? What is the point? It's a completely irrelevant place. So this answers your question, Darcy. They're the same people. It says explicitly they are the same people. And of course, they're talked about interchangeably, and as I said, they mixed. Obviously, the sons of Keturah and Ishmael's children, obviously mixed. Okay, now let's talk about the question about Paran. Because remember, it said in Genesis 21:21, where did he live? Ishmael live? The wilderness of Paran. Okay, so that's when a Muslim's going to say, yeah, see, complete confirmation of Islam. Because Paran is Far'an, which is Mount Far'an in Mecca. See, there's a mountain in Mecca called Far'an. And P and F are the same, okay, linguistically. So, oh, look, Mount Paran is in Mecca. So it must be the same place, right? Well, what does the Torah say? Go to Numbers 13. Which is obviously not even directly about the passage, right? So but it's in the Torah, so what does the Torah say about Paran? What happens in that place? What else happens? Okay, don't give it away, Darcy. Okay, Numbers 13, 1-3. I've got it on the screen, so I'll read this one. Okay, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, so they're in the wilderness wanderings, right? Okay, it's the context. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a chief among them." So Moses sent them from according to the command of the Lord, all of them who were heads of the people of Israel. So Moses, I want you to think of this, the Islamic requirement here, to understand this in an Islamic way. Moses sent the spies to scout out the land of Israel, or the land of Canaan, from where? Mecca. Was Moses in Mecca? If Mount Faran was in Mecca, Moses was in Mecca with the whole congregation of Israel, wandering for 40 years in the region of Mecca. And he sent his spies from there into the land of Canaan, more than 1,300 kilometers north. Okay, also, I want you to remember, how many days does it take on a camel? 40 days. Okay, good. The end part of that story in Numbers 13, when they come back, look what it says. At the end of how many days? At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land. So that means they went there, they scouted out the whole land, which is probably most of that time, right? And they came back in 40 days. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land, and they came to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. Kadesh is also important because any other reference to Kadesh, now you know according to the Torah, is in Paran. Okay? And there are more references. I don't have enough time to go through all the references, okay? Kadesh Other things happen in Kadesh. Kadesh is just on the outskirts of the promised land. Okay, it is ultimately part of the promised land that's inherited, but it's on the outskirts of Canaan at the time. Okay, so they come back after 40 days of traveling into the land, going around the land, scouting it all out, examining it, and they came back at the end of 40 days total, when it's 40 days each way just to travel, okay, let alone to scout it out, if they were to go from Mecca. Where is the congregation of Israel stationed? They're just outside of the land of Canaan, right? So that's obvious. You're going to send the spies and they're going to come back, right? So they brought back word to them, etc. This is the map of the spies. Okay? At the very bottom is Kadesh Barnea. Okay? Kadesh, which is in the wilderness of Paran. Yeah, they're not in Mecca, which is, I'd be through the floor if I pointed down to Mecca, okay, on this map. That's what they're saying. The scouts were, they're not saying it because they don't know it, okay? This is stuff that is, why do they not have to normally think about it? Because they don't know the biblical narrative. They don't care about the biblical narrative, okay? They have no idea what the Torah says. We are showing them stuff that they've never heard before either. Nobody is talking about this information, okay? So, conclusion of this pillar. According to the Torah, did Ishmael live anywhere near Mecca? According to the Torah, did Ishmael live anywhere near Mecca? No, thank you. According to the Torah, did Ishmael marry an Arab woman from the tribe of Jorhum? Who did he marry? An Egyptian woman. Or more exactly, a woman from the land of Egypt, okay? According to the Torah, was Muhammad an Ishmaelite? No. Is Islam an Abrahamic religion? No. That's pretty big. If it's not Abrahamic, it's also not from God, according to Islam. Because what did I say? Prophethood was given to Abraham and his descendants. And what was the prophecy that the Qur'an was saying was supposedly Abraham and Ishmael prayed when they were building the Kaaba? Is that God will send a messenger from amongst their descendants. But that didn't happen, according to the Torah, which means Islam is not an Abrahamic religion. So let me tell you all, please stop saying it. Please stop agreeing to it. Please stop saying there are 3 Abrahamic religions. I'm going to tell you there's 1 Abrahamic religion, Christianity. Rabbinical Judaism is not Abrahamic either. It's not just Islam. Okay, Rabbinical Judaism, as I've been talking from last time, distorts the whole message of the Old Testament. They are not following it. Okay, so they can't claim that it's Abrahamic. Now, genetically, of course, the Jews come from Abraham, but they are not following the teachings of Abraham and the promises to Abraham and the covenants, etc. That's the rabbis. I'm not talking about Jews in general. I mean, there's Messianic Jews. There's Jews who follow Jesus, the Messiah. He is the fulfillment of it. We are the only ones, the Christians and other Jewish followers of Jesus, they are the ones who are really the followers of the Torah and Abraham. That's the point. But certainly, I mean, put Judaism aside for a second, but it is important to say it because, as I said, Islam ultimately has that as its roots, okay, Rabbinical Judaism. But it's very important to say because we don't want to be partial, and Muslims see this. You're going to say this, oh, it's a different God in Islam, and it's a different, like totally different religion, but you're not going to say that about Judaism. Christians rarely say, oh, it's a different God. It's like there's a Muslim see, there's kind of like we're being inconsistent. Double standards. So we want to move away from that. Let's do the 5th pillar at this point. We need to round out the master key, which is the deconstruction part, because there's so much more I want to share today. Okay, so the 5th pillar. So then we're going to go on to another story, and this one is very important to us to grasp how we're getting to this story comparison, because it's a little bit more indirect Okay, but you need to really grasp it to understand how to bring the Muslim there. So, in Islamic teaching, this pillar is essentially at its core saying that Muhammad follows in the pattern of previous prophets. Okay? All the prophets in Islam are like the same. They have the same message, the same patterns in their ministry, rejected by their people, okay? Preached against idols. Often they're migrating from one place to another because they're persecuted, just like Muhammad. Okay? He was persecuted in Mecca, had to migrate, do the hijrah, the migration to Medina before he got more of a following and could go back and take Mecca. Okay, so he's saying this pattern really we see in all of the previous prophets like Noah and Abraham and so on. And so because he consistently follows the same pattern, this shows you he is one of them. Okay, but the premier comparison is Moses. That Muhammad is like Moses. Okay? So the question we're going to essentially be asking is, was the source of Muhammad's revelation the same as the source of Moses' revelation? Okay, so where are we going to go? This is again a hadith, but again it's essential foundation to Islam. Okay, so in Sahih Bukhari, same collection, number 3. It's like right at the beginning of the collection, the third hadith. This is what it has. I have it on here, okay? So we'll go to here. Hadith number 3 says the mother, this is Aisha, the mother of the faithful believers. This is one of Muhammad's wives. The commencement of the divine revelation to Allah's messenger was in the form of good, righteous, true dreams, which came true like bright daylight, and then the love of seclusion was bestowed upon him. So in other words, Muhammad would get dreams, and then this led to him wanting to go out into seclusion in the wilderness, like on, let's say, meditation retreats, okay? He used to go in seclusion in the cave of Hira, another word you need to know. In the cave of Hira, where he used to worship Allah alone continuously for many nights before returning to or desiring to see his family. He used to take with him the journey food for the stay and then come back to his wife Khadija. So this is his only wife at the time, Khadija. Okay, Aisha's later in his life. She's the one who's telling this story. Okay, it's reported by Aisha, but here is Khadija as the wife in the time of the event. So Muhammad goes back home to his wife Khadija to take his food likewise again. So he's going to go back out. He goes home to get more food to go back out again. Till suddenly the truth, meaning the revelation, okay, descended upon him while he was in the cave of Hira. The angel came to him and asked him to read. The prophet replied, I don't know how to read. Remember, Muhammad is illiterate, right? So then the angel caught me forcefully. This is Muhammad speaking now. So he's telling, okay? So the angel caught me forcefully and pressed me so hard that I could not bear it anymore. He then released me and again asked me to read, and I replied, I don't know how to read. Thereupon he caught me again and pressed me a second time till I could not bear it anymore. He then released me and again asked me to read, but I replied, I don't know how to read, or what shall I read? Thereupon he caught me for the third time and pressed me, and then released me and said, read in the name of your Lord, who has created all that exists, has created man from a clot and a piece of thick coagulated blood. Read, and your Lord is the most generous. Now notice the underlined passage. Those lines is giving you a summary of the verses that were revealed at this point. This is from Surah 96. Okay, 1 to 3. Technically, Muslims say it's 1 to 5. That's revealed at this point. Okay, those are the first verses of the Qur'an that Allah reveals to Muhammad through the angel. That's the claim. In the cave of Hira. So this is the origin story of the revelation given to Muhammad. Then Allah's messenger, that's Muhammad, returned with the revelation and with his heart beating severely. Then he went to Khadija bint Khuwailid and said, cover me, cover me. They covered him till his fear was over, and after that he told Khadija everything that had happened and said, I fear that something may happen to me. Khadijah replied, never, by Allah. Allah will never disgrace you. You keep good relations with your kith and kin, help the poor and destitute, serve your guests generously, and assist the deserving, calamity-afflicted ones. Okay, in other words, Khadijah's like, you're a good person. God wouldn't do that to you. This is not a bad thing from God. God, this is like, we like to joke, Khadijah has not heard the way of the master before, right? Are you a good person? Okay, she thinks you're a good person, so that means God's going to bless you. Okay, so she's trying to reassure him. So Khadijah then accompanied him to her cousin Waraka. You don't need to know all the family names. Waraka bin Nawfal, who during the period of ignorance, that is like before Muhammad came, became a Christian and used to write the writing with Hebrew letters. Now there's another version of this that says it's Arabic, not Hebrew. Okay, he used to write with Hebrew or Arabic letters. He would write the gospel in Hebrew or Arabic as much as Allah wished him to write. He was an old man and had lost his eyesight. Khadijah said to Waraka, listen to the story of your nephew, O my cousin. Waraka asked, O my nephew, what have you seen? Allah's messenger described whatever he had seen. Waraka said, this is the same one who keeps the secrets, i.e. angel Gabriel, whom Allah sent to, read it, Moses. It's the same angel that appeared to you in the cave that appeared to Moses. I wish I were young and could live up to the time when your people would turn you out, meaning reject you. He's not saying, I hope you get rejected. He knows he will, okay? Because that's what happens to all the prophets, like I said. Allah's messenger asked, will he drive me out? Waraka replied in the affirmative and said, any man who came with something similar, meaning prophetic ministry, to what you have brought was treated with hostility, and if I should remain alive till the day when you will be turned out, then I would support you strongly. But after a few days, Waraka died, and the divine revelation was also paused for a while, meaning he didn't keep getting revelation until a little while later. So, question, to what did Waraka compare Muhammad's experience? Yeah, and actually, if you look closely, it doesn't say, it's in the brackets that it's Gabriel named, but it's not actually named in the text. Okay, it just says the same one that appeared to, the same angel that appeared to Moses appeared to you. So what did Waraka compare Muhammad's experience? He's saying it's the angel that appeared to Moses. Now, question, we have to be thinking, this is how we're getting to the story comparison, okay? So Waraka's the one who makes the comparison, okay? Which story could Waraka be thinking of when an angel appeared to Moses? There's only one. Burning bush. Angel of the Lord appeared to Moses. Now, every Christian, you need to put out of your head that the angel of the Lord is God. Yes, I know he's God, okay? But it's in an angelic form, so we're still talking about an angel. The reason we have to put it out of our head is because now you're bringing in theology. Put aside theology, remember? We're not comparing theology. We're comparing the details. Okay, so which story could he be thinking of? It's only the burning bush. Now, some Muslims, when I've said this, they kind of, from experience, you kind of realize how you have to navigate things when there's a little hiccup in the conversation. So sometimes, oh no, it can't be that. There wasn't an angel that appeared to Moses in the burning bush, they'll say. Because they're thinking of the Quranic account of the burning bush. And the Quranic account doesn't have an angel at the burning bush. But I said, okay, so this is how I realized this is how to navigate that point. Number 4 question. Did Waraka have the Quran to know the Quran's account of that story? No. It was just beginning to be revealed to Muhammad. And in those verses, those are the only verses revealed in the cave. Anything about Moses and the burning bush? No. Okay, so how Waraka doesn't know the Quranic version? Right, so which scripture would contain that story? The Torah. Okay, now it only mentioned the Injil that he knew, but is the Injil about Moses and the burning bush? No. Okay, so he's got to have access in some way to, as he's claiming, to the Torah. Okay, so then we say, what version of the story in the Torah what story of the Torah in the Torah is he thinking of? Well, there's only one account of an angel appearing to Moses. And it just so happens to be the commissioning of Moses for his prophetic ministry. Isn't that, if he's probably thinking of something to connect it with, this is supposedly the claim is this is the commissioning of Muhammad in the cave. So he's connecting it to the commissioning of Moses. So it must be the same angel. Okay, so we're going to look at, and in summary form, we're not going to read it because we don't have the time. And we do this with Muslims too. We just summarize for them. But you need to know very well Genesis or Exodus chapters 3 and 4. Okay, that's essentially what you're going to summarize that account to them. So, I want this one to guide us through here, thinking about it. What is similar that could have led Waraka to think to compare them? Well, I already said it is the commissioning stories of both of them. They both have an angel. Okay. Also, they're both out on their own in the wilderness. Right? So Muhammad is out in a cave in a mountain. Moses is also at a mountain at the bottom. Okay? Out on his own in the wilderness, according to the biblical account. Now, so what we're going to do is we're going to simply compare these accounts, because what is the assumption that Waraka has? How can I want you to think about this. How can Waraka conclude that that the angel that appeared to Muhammad in the cave is the same angel that appeared to Moses? How can he come to that conclusion? What must he be thinking about these two stories? That they're so similar. That it's got to be I don't know why you would say a similar story that both have angels would be the same angel anyway. But they got to be so similar that it's like, oh, it's got to be the same angel. Right? That's the only thing that can justify otherwise he's not justified in saying what he says, in which case Muhammad should have discounted what he said, right? So the only way he could even possibly be saying to have a justifiable conclusion is that these stories are so similar. So that's why we're going to compare them. Muhammad in the cave of Hira and Moses in the burning bush. So we compare it in 3 stages. We keep it simple, okay? We're going to compare them each stage. There are 3 stages in both stories we can compare, put side by side. Each of them on their own in the wilderness and are commissioned. That's the first stage. Second stage, each one, so Moses in his account and Muhammad in his account, each one tells another person. Okay? So Moses leaves from the first scene at the burning bush and he goes and he tells Aaron. Muhammad leaves from the scene in the cave of Hira and he goes back home and he tells his wife Khadijah, who covers him with a blanket, right? Third stage, after having that conversation with those individuals, Aaron and Khadijah, they both go together, Aaron and Moses, or Muhammad and Khadijah, both go together and tell more people. Okay, so they both tell, in the case of Aaron and Moses, the elders of Israel and the people of Israel collectively, and Muhammad and Khadijah tell Waraka, who is Khadijah's cousin. So we just set these side by side, stage by stage, and see are each of these stages similar to each other. Okay, so let's think about it. I don't know if I have notes here. Yeah, no, okay. Let's just think about the stories. This is what we do with them, okay? So we start with Moses, because we want to end with Muhammad at the very end. Okay, so Moses goes off into the wilderness. He goes, he's not with anybody else, and he goes to the burning bush. He encounters the angel. The angel gives him a very clear mission, right? You're going to go back to Egypt. You're going to go confront Pharaoh. You're going to tell him this. I give you the message, what you're going to relay to him. And Moses is kind of like, okay, well, but who are you? So he tells him who he is. Okay, the angel's identifying himself. Okay, and what do you say? The signs, yeah, I was going to do that next. Okay, so then Moses is like, okay, but when I go back to my people, Israel, they're not going to believe. They're going to say, who sent you? And then they're not going to believe me. Like, how am I going to convince them? So the angel tells him, perform 3 miraculous signs. Okay, there's actually a third. Most Christians forget the third. First is throwing down the staff that becomes a serpent. Second is the hand put in his cloak that becomes a white. And third is taking some water and pouring it on the ground and it becomes blood. So all three, that's not the plagues. These are miraculous evidences that support that he was commissioned by God. Okay? So, and then, you know, Moses is kind of reluctant, let's say. Okay? He doesn't want to do it. Okay? But in the end, God kind of gets mad at him because he's like, he insists that he's not going to be the one. And then he's like, okay, fine, I'll send Aaron with you. Okay? And then Moses leaves from that scene. And at that point, does he believe he has been sent on a divine mission and is a prophet? That's the key question. Okay, yes, he does. Now, he wasn't like super cooperative at first, but even in his lack of cooperation, he knows it's God commissioning him. He's just like, this is completely uncomfortable for Muslims, actually, that he would be resistant, because he shouldn't be, because he's supposed to be a sinless prophet, right? Okay, but in the Torah's account, we don't emphasize the resistance, but the point is, even in his resistance, it's not like he doesn't know who's sending him. Okay, so he knows. Like, is there any shadow of a doubt in Moses' mind that he's sent on a divine mission and he's a prophet? No. Okay. So now we go to this first scene for Muhammad. Muhammad is in the cave of Hira. He's off on his own, and a seeming angelic type being, a spirit, appears to him in the cave and presses him so hard, basically choking him 3 times where he can't breathe, right? Let's say he's not choking him on the neck. Let's make sure we don't overstate it at all, right? Just say he's pressing him so hard he's suffocating him. He can't breathe, right? And then he releases him and he says to read, and I'm not sure why the angel didn't know he couldn't read. But so he couldn't read. In fact, the word, it's important to know, the word for read in Arabic is ikra, which also means recite. It's also the same Arabic root as Qur'an, which is the recitation. Okay? So it isn't necessarily like read from a physical book, but it is recite. Well, he doesn't even, what is he supposed to recite either? He doesn't know, he hasn't been given the revelation yet. Okay, so he's pressed 3 times. Muhammad is not really enjoying this, is he? Okay, and so at the end of this scene, he leaves the cave. Now I'm going to ask you, was he given a clear mission? No. Was he told what he's supposed to do? No. He's given some things he's supposed to recite, some verses, but he isn't given a mission. Does Muhammad at this point in the story believe he's a prophet sent from God? No. Good. So notice the contrast already. Second stage, Moses. Moses goes and meets up with Aaron as God had directed. And long story short, is he relays to Aaron what had happened. He seems to have performed the signs to Aaron. Aaron believes. So who at the end of this scene believes that Moses was sent as a prophet? Both Moses and Aaron. Okay. Second stage for Muhammad. Muhammad goes home to his wife Khadijah. What is a good question to ask. What feeling did Muhammad have at this point? Fear. I mean, so much that this grown man goes back to his wife and wants to be covered in blankets. Okay? Now, I'd say, look, I'm not going to ridicule him. Like, I think I would be too after that kind of experience, right? It's like, and probably, what is he afraid of? Because he tells Khadijah he's afraid that something's going to happen. So I'm going to say, like, is he afraid of something good going to happen? No, I see something bad. In fact, another version of the same hadith, like a different place, says something evil. Okay? So he thinks something evil is going to happen to him. When he finally comes to him, he calms down and he tells what happened. And then she's like, no, Allah wouldn't do this, like, would not do such bad things to you, like, in trying to reassure him. So at the end of this scene, who believes that Muhammad is a prophet? The wife Khadijah? Does Muhammad? No, he's still not convinced, even by her. She's trying to reassure him. So I want you to think. The one who wasn't there for the experience is trying to convince the guy who was there that actually this was good, not bad. Right? It's from God, even though she didn't witness it. And he's still not convinced. Now, some Muslims will say, no, she wasn't a believer. So, okay, well, it's amazing. She wasn't a believer either. So neither of them believed. Like, that's more differences. It's not more of the same. Okay? But actually, according to the biography of Muhammad, it says that Khadijah is counted as the first among the believers. Okay? So even Muslims get that wrong a lot. But it's she's a woman, so kind of I guess she doesn't really count. So that's fine, okay? Whether she's a believer or not believer. So let's say she's not a believer. So at the end of the second stage, neither Muhammad believed he was a prophet nor Khadijah. Or let's say she was a believer. The one who had the experience still didn't believe he was a prophet, and the one who wasn't there was trying to convince him, but she couldn't successfully do that. So the third stage, Moses and Aaron go together to the elders of Israel and tell them what happened. And it says that Aaron performs the signs to the elders of Israel, giving them evidence. Okay, notice like evidence also, and miracles, which also Muhammad is not doing, because he doesn't even think that he's sent as a prophet. Okay, and they believe. So the elders of Israel believe. Moses and Aaron go tell the elders of Israel they believe with evidence, with miracles. So here's the pattern we see with Muhammad's commission, or Moses' commissioning, sorry about that. With Moses' commissioning, is that Moses, who is the one who had the experience, immediately believed he's a prophet sent on a divine mission, and he went and he convinced everybody else with evidence. Does that sound like Muhammad? Now we get to the last stage for Muhammad. Khadijah, his wife, brings Muhammad to her elderly cousin Warqa, who has now gone blind, who has supposedly some acquaintance with the previous scriptures that tell an account of the burning bush. And we're going to say, so he tells him, no, you're a prophet of Allah, you're a prophet of God, because these stories are so similar? Okay, that's what I asked them. And of course, they're not. I'd say, look, I'm with Muhammad. Muhammad was right. Warqa was wrong. Muhammad was right. See, unfortunately, Muhammad couldn't read. So he didn't have access to the Torah where he could have checked the actual account. Warqa, I don't know if he didn't have real access to it or if he's lying. I don't know what his motivation is. But he's the one saying that these stories are so similar to try to justify. And so unfortunately, Muhammad didn't know, and he believed Warqa's account and his testimony, and that's why he believed he was a prophet. Okay, good thing for us, we can read and we can check it. Okay, so that is essentially the closing of our deconstruction of Islam. Okay, and then what I usually do is I then kind of go through a summary of points, summary conclusion, to remind them of the 5 things we've gone through. So what have we gone through? The Qur'an affirmed the Torah in the time of Muhammad in the 7th century, and we have manuscripts predating that time, including things like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint. The author of the Qur'an is not the same author of the Torah. The stories are completely irreconcilable in many ways. Abraham and Ishmael never traveled to Mecca, and they didn't build the Kaaba. And since they didn't build it, it was pagans who established it. Islam is not an Abrahamic religion. Ishmael didn't marry an Arab woman in Mecca, but married an Egyptian woman. And he lived in the region of modern-day Jordan. Muhammad was not an Ishmaelite. Muhammad was not a candidate for prophethood because he did not have Abrahamic ancestry. Muhammad's spiritual experience did not follow in the pattern of previous true prophets like Moses. Unfortunately, Muhammad could not fact-check the claims of people like Warqa or later rabbis who told him false information about it that convinced him he was a prophet from God. Okay? So that's the deconstruction. Now, I'm going to quickly summarize what we would do next, but we're not going to spend time on it really in our training, just because there's so much other stuff that's very important for us to learn. And this is in your handout. If somebody can tell us the page where we're now going to reconstructing. It'll probably be after mixed stories.
24.
24, thank you. Okay, page 24.
Back with I'm just sort of like, I'm curious what you've experienced.
We're going to go there. We're going to go there, like their reaction, okay? But I know I just need to, because there's so much more we can add on to the deconstruction, I need to tell you where you're going to go next if you can go there, okay? In other words, if you have made a huge dent and you've broken through, now you can proceed into the next stage of reconstructing biblical pillars, okay? So I'm going to summarize what that is, but you're going to also find that many Muslims need more. Okay, so we're going to do more, and we're going to do a lot more in the rest of our session today. Okay, so what do we do next if we can actually move on, if we deconstructed enough? So there are 5 pillars we need to relay for the biblical pillars. 4 of them, as I mentioned, are Old Testament. So the first pillar, and the passages are there. We're not going to read them all today. I'm just going to summarize what we're doing. So the first thing is we go back to Genesis. Guess what? We've been using Genesis mainly throughout the whole thing. Okay, we're going to keep going there. So essentially how we're going to transition, I'm going to say, okay, so now that we've done that, okay, I want to share with you the true message of the Torah. We're not saying about Jesus. We're not jumping to Jesus. We're saying we're continually using the Torah. So we're going to continue to use the Torah, which we just used to dismantle the Qur'an. We're going to say, well, let's go. What is the Torah really getting at? Because all we've been using it is to say, here are contradictory statements between the two. But what is the Torah actually saying? So the first pillar is original sin, specifically the origin of death and moral corruption. Okay, the Quran denies all of that. So we see in the Torah, now at this point we need to have the Quran behind us. So we're not going to be interacting with objections. If we're interacting with objections, we add on more to deconstructing. Okay? At this point, all this is now we are just like presenting them the material and walking through what the Old Testament and in the last pillar, the New Testament, says about these 5 pillars of the biblical foundations. Okay? If there's resistance, we haven't done enough deconstructing. We need to go back. Okay? So the way this should play out is we're just going through the passages and they're listening. And at the end, they can have questions and we can interact. That's fine. Okay? But essentially, we establish original sin, that death comes as a result of sin, specifically of Adam and Eve, and it spreads to humanity. That's in Genesis 2 and 3. And then we talk about the second pillar, blood atonement, namely that God establishes a blood sacrificial system as payment for sin, that there needs to be death as a substitute to pay for sin. Okay, again, Islam denies that. So we're reestablishing foundations that were distorted. The third, then we go to the suffering servant. So that was Leviticus 17:11. That blood was given for atonement on the altar. Okay, and we're going to say that's a different, even though we understand it's a different book, but it's part of the Torah, it's the Pentateuch. Third is suffering servant. There I normally would I would have them read the passage, or I'll read it to them, open. They got to see it. And I'll just kind of go to another passage, and if I can avoid telling them what it is, I'll try to avoid that so that they can kind of I'm going to ask them, who does it sound like? Okay, and then I'm going to tell them, because they're all going to say Jesus, unless they're like a super trained apologist who already knows Jewish objections to Christianity from the rabbis, then they're going to say it's Jesus. And say, yeah, exactly. So what told you that? Well, it's the one guy dying on behalf of everybody else and paying for their sins with his innocent life. Okay? And verse 53, verse 10 is a very key term. In Hebrew, it uses the term asham, which is specifically the guilt offering. He lays down his life as a guilt offering. So he is suffering in fulfillment ultimately in line with the sacrificial system as a payment for this. This is the Messiah dying on. This is Old Testament. This is not New Testament. Okay? I pretty much have it all. I didn't even need the New Testament. Okay, and then finally, I'm going to go do things like, some of you know the approach of sharing the gospel with the Romans road. You use various verses from the book of Romans. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. the wages of sin is death, the free gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus. That's 6:23, 5, 6 to 7. For at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. And then, if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, rose from the dead, etc. That's Romans 10, 9 to 10. So those verses, that's the fifth pillar, actually sharing the gospel itself. And I'll combine that also with what is called the way of the master, where you use the 10 commandments. Okay? Usually what I'll do is I'll use it after I start the Romans road with 3:23, then I'll go to the 10 commandments. Because it says in Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Well, like in what ways? Okay, in what ways have they sinned? That verse doesn't tell us, so we're going to go to the 10 commandments. We're going to go through examples. We're going to, apply to them personally. Have you done this? What do you call someone who's done that? Okay, and we're now hopefully bringing conviction of sin. And then we're going to conclude it with the rest of the verses in the Romans road. And 10, 9 to 10 is an invitation. Okay, so basically say how you receive the gift of salvation that we've been talking about is by believing in your heart and confessing with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, meaning he's God and he's the master of your life, and that he rose from the dead. Okay, that's everything. All right, so maybe we're going to take a break, but just kind of priming us for after the break, we're going to be coming back to what Darcy was bringing up, which, where I have it, essentially this slide. Has their confidence been shaken after we've done the deconstruction part, the 5 pillars, or has it not? So what do we do if it's not shaken enough? Where do we go next? That's what we're going to talk about after the break. Thank you, guys. Okay, I'm going to ask you for the next section, what we're going to do, I'm going to ask you to open but don't look, okay? Open to page 25 and then maybe flip the handout over because I don't want you to see what we're going to uncover, okay? I want you to kind of have a live discovery, okay? And I'm also going to be inviting up, it's Denise, right? Okay, and she's going to be our guinea pig, I guess. All right. If you want maybe your Bible too, if you don't have it, we have one up here. Okay, you can use it. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Okay. So the issue was, okay, so has their confidence been shaken? Okay. Well, if yes, we can move on to the next stages of reconstruction with relaying Old Testament foundations and sharing the gospel. If no, then we got a whole bunch of other stuff you can share, okay? This is typically where we're going to go next. And what I want you to, what we're going to do is we're going to be reading a Quranic, we're going to start with we should start with the Quran, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because she should know the story, I think. I think she knows.
Which
Bible stories.
Oh, Bible.
Yeah. You kind of have to know your Bible stories to what we're gonna do is we're gonna because I'm pretty sure Denise, you haven't read the Quran, right? Okay, so you can come over closer. Okay, okay. So we're gonna have you read. You can put the Bible down, actually, your phone down, and we're gonna read the Quranic story, and then we're gonna kind of get your live reaction. Okay. All right, so this is kind of, if you think about it, it's like somebody who knows the Bible more and is now like for the first time reading the Quran, and this is kind of their reaction to it. That's kind of what we want you to see. All right, so the first passage we're going to look at, and so everybody should follow along in a Quran. So on their phone, you can go to Quran.com.
Should I do that?
You can use that where we have. Okay. Let's use this. We're going to go to chapter 28, Surah 28, verses 23 to 29. And so we're going to read about Moses fleeing from Egypt and going to Midian.
So is it the whole story?
No.
Is it- no,
Verse 23 to 29.
But is this 28?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So 23
Yep.
to 29.
Okay.
Okay, so just to remind us, okay, we're reading about the Quranic version of the story of Moses when he fled Egypt and he goes to Midian and he goes to a well. Okay, so you're going to...
Use the microphone.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm assuming this is talking about Moses. When he arrived at the well of Midian, he found a group of people watering their herds. Apart from them, he noticed 2 women holding back their herd. He asked them, "What is the problem?" They replied, "We cannot water our animals until the other shepherds are done, for our father is a very old man." So he watered their herd for them, then withdrew to the shade and prayed, "My Lord, I'm truly in desperate need of whatever provision you may have in store for me." Then one of the 2 women came to him walking bashfully. She said, "My father is inviting you so he may reward you for watering our animals for us." Then Moses came to him and told him his whole story. The old man said, "Have no fear, for you're now safe from the wrongdoing people." One of the 2 daughters suggested, "Oh, my dear father, hire him. The best man for employment is definitely the strong and trustworthy one." The old man proposed, "I wish to marry one of these 2 daughters of mine to you, provided that you stay in my service for 8 years. If you complete 10, it will be a favor from you. But I do not wish to make it difficult for you. God willing, you will find me an agreeable man." Moses responded, "Then it is settled between you and I. Whichever term I fulfill, there will be no further obligation on me, and God is a witness to what we say." Can I make any commentary yet?
Not to
When Moses had completed the term and was traveling with his family, he spotted a fire on the side of Mount Tur. He said to his family, "Stay here, for I have spotted..."
That's good.
Okay.
Okay, let's stay close. We're both on the mic.
Okay.
So, what stood out to you?
This, I could be wrong, but
No.
very much sounds like Jacob's deal.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. See, you just need somebody who knows the Bible stories. Don't lose the page.
No.
Okay, so what was it in the account that signaled to you this sounds like Jacob?
The well, and definitely because he was I don't say the name right. Laban, negotiating with Laban for working for him, and there's 2 daughters then.
Right. So how many daughters did Laban have?
2.
2. How many daughters are here in the story?
2.
Okay, that's interesting. Does anybody remember? Do you remember how many daughters Jethro had, the father-in-law of Moses?
I only know of
7.
Oh, okay.
In Exodus 2. Okay, we'll read it actually in a second. So, all right, so we got that. That's the wrong number of daughters, which corresponds to the story of Jacob, because there's 2 daughters of Laban. And it's emphasized it, right? It's 1 of 2, 1 of 2, 1 of 2. And a question, did Moses in Exodus work to get his wife?
No.
Okay, no, he didn't. Who worked to get his wife? Jacob. Now, he worked
Many
7
times
years plus another 7, so it's the wrong number of years. It's 8 or 10. But how many wives did Jacob work to get? This is kind of a trick question.
Well, he thought he was working for 1.
There you go. Say it in the mic.
He thought he was working for 1.
Yeah, he worked only for 1, but he ended up getting 2.
Yeah.
Okay?
But working extra.
So he worked to get Rachel the first time, and he got the wrong wife. He worked to get Rachel the second time, and he got her. So he only worked to get Rachel twice. Okay? So he worked 2 terms to get 1 wife. It's interesting. Let's go to Exodus now. So let's read it on yours. Okay. So Exodus 2. End of Exodus 2.
Like verse 16.
Yeah, very end of 15 is where it starts. He sat down by a well. You can't read it.
Oh, okay. And he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. And when they came home to their father Ruel, he said, "How is it that you've come home so soon today?" They said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hands of the shepherds and even drew water for us and watered the flock." He said to his daughters, "Then where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him that he may eat bread." And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah, etc.
Okay, now keep one more verse. 3 verse 1. 1 and 2? Yeah, okay. Verses 1 and 2.
Yeah. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed.
Okay, so that's the end of, that's the parallel with what we read in Surah 28 in the Quran. Okay, so question is, in Exodus, who was Moses traveling with when he came to the burning bush?
No one.
No one. What was he doing?
Has a sheep, right?
He's shepherding Jethro's flock.
So he has somebody like.
So is he intending to go somewhere?
No.
No. Is he planning to go back to Egypt at this point?
No.
No.
Heck
Okay. Heck no, because exactly, right? He's a fugitive.
Yeah.
Okay, he's good. He's been there like 40 years. Okay, he's not going anywhere back. All right. But if you reopen.
Yep.
Yeah. And read verse 29 again in the Quran.
When Moses had completed the term and was traveling with his family, he spotted a fire on the side of Mount Tur.
Who was he traveling with?
His family.
Who, after he worked to get his wife and had a family, traveled with his family back to his homeland? Jacob. So it's still Jacob, but it's mixed in with Moses. Okay, it's interesting, actually, the Quran has no account of Jacob. There's no Jacob story. Well, because it's Moses in the Quran, right? Okay, so we call this an example of mixed stories. Now, it's very interesting. Actually, if we go to Genesis 29, if you want to pull that up.
Yep.
Good.
Sure. Which part?
Start at toward the beginning.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just read.
Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. For out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone on the well's mouth was large, and when the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back on its place and cover the mouth of the well. Jacob said to them, "My brothers, where do you come from?" They said, "We are from Haran." He said to them, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" They said, "We know him." And they said to them, "Is it well with him?" They said, "It is well, and see, Rachel his daughter is coming with the sheep." He said, "Behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go, pasture them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep." While he was still speaking with...
I think that's good.
Okay.
Oh, no, sorry. Did we get to the... You put it back. No, keep reading, sorry.
Yeah. While we were still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now, as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is going on in the story? There is what's the obstacle here for watering?
The stone.
The stone. There's a really heavy stone lid on the well. Now I want you to think, in Exodus, was there a heavy stone lid that Moses had to move off the well?
No.
In fact, it's interesting because the order of the people who came to the well, if you think about it, Moses, who are the characters? Moses or Jacob, and then the women, or Rachel, and then also the male shepherds. Okay, the order is all different. Who arrives at the well, if you look at it closely. But also in Exodus, there is no heavy stone lid because Moses gets there, then the women get there in the Exodus, and they already start watering their flock. And then the male shepherds arrive last. They're there first in the Jacob narrative, but in Genesis. But in Exodus, they arrive last. The women are already watering their flock. They interrupt them, and they steal their water, right? And then Moses comes in and steps in and fends them off and waters the flock for the girls, right? So here, that's not what happens. All the male shepherds are waiting because there's a heavy lid on the heavy stone lid on the well that's too heavy for one person to move.
For 4 people to move.
Or, sorry?
4 people.
4 people. Okay, so yeah.
3 plus 1.
3 plus. There you go. Okay, yeah. So and so they agree. They have this common agreement. We're going to wait till all the shepherds arrive, then we'll move this lid off
Maybe
altogether.
10, right?
Because if they were not to do that and somebody came when nobody else is there, they're not going to be able to open the well. So they're like, so nobody's caught alone and they can't open the well. We're all going to agree to come together, wait till everyone's here, do it together. So Jacob then sees Rachel coming and he's like, well, she's attractive. I'm going to show off. I'm all on my own. I'm going to move the really heavy lid, water all the flock, put it back. Okay, so that's the story in Jacob's account. Well, I'm going to read, and if you open your handbook on that page 25, you'll see a quotation. You can follow along.
Is there more?
You can sit down for a second, but we're going to do another one. You can stay or sit down. Okay, but I want you to read this on that page at the bottom. It says Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir is a commentator, so in the 14th century. So this is from one of his books called The Stories of the Prophets, where he goes through and he tells the Islamic stories of the prophets. And they also add in, because the Quran doesn't tell a lot of information often, so they had to fill in gaps and fill in the story. So it's very interesting when Ibn Kathir is retelling this part of the story about Moses at the well, what he says. It says, the exegetes said, that's the Muslim exegetes of the Quran, said when the shepherds have watered their flocks, they would put back a huge stone on the mouth of the well. Then those 2 women would come and water their flocks from the water left over from the flocks of the shepherds. However, that day Moses came and removed the stone and watered the flocks for them, and then put the stone back in its place. Caliph Umar said that it was so huge stone that it could only be lifted by 10 men. Moses moved the rock lid off the well. You see? That's not even in the Quran. Now, the Quran says there are 2 qualifications that the young lady says to her father. We should hire him because he is strong and trustworthy. So the idea comes from he's strong. How was he strong? I guess he moved the heavy stone lid off the well. Moses. Okay, you can see actually, this is like 14th century. And they still are mixing the stories. They still don't really have access to the actual text. And where are they getting it from? I guess maybe the Jews are keep telling them stories or something. Because this is from nowhere. It's Jacob. Right? So it's Jacob in the Quran. It's Jacob in the Islamic commentaries even more. Okay? In fact, there are some Muslim commentaries that say that when Moses was leaving, he had to select from the flock what he was going to inherit. So he had them like go through getting spotted and all of that stuff, which is all Jacob again, right? So this is the point. Now I want you to think with the mixed stories. This is one example. We're going to use another one next, okay? Now I want you to think the Muslims are going to say the Torah was corrupted in this way? How is that even possible? And why? And when? And like all of that. But just try to unravel that. So the Torah, because the Torah had to be, according to their claims, had to have originally told the stories the way the Quran tells it. And then I guess the Jews changed it from the Quranic version of the Torah to what we have now in Genesis and Exodus? Okay, so what? Moses originally in Exodus, it used to say that he worked for 8 or 10 years to get his wife. One of two, right? And he also was only in Midian for 10 years before he went back to Egypt. And he was traveling with his family when he went to the burning bush. Why was he traveling with his family? Because he was intending to go back to Egypt. You see?
Finishing term.
Because he finished the term, and now he can go back. So this is completely incompatible with everything that's in the story and the
Genesis
in
30, 25.
Yeah. 30, 25.
25, just read for them.
Somebody gets it, they can read it out loud. 30, 25. As soon as Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own home and country."
Bingo.
Right? So Joseph is the last child born before they leave from Haran. Okay? Benjamin is born in Canaan. So once he's born, it's like the first child to Rachel, now we can leave. Okay, and they're going to go home. But as we noted before, Moses was not planning to go back home to Egypt. He was a fugitive.
How many years?
And also, how long was Moses in Midian? Anybody know? Got it. 40 years. But how long was he in Midian according to the Quran? There you go, 10. It's like 8 or 10, but they always say he served a longer term, Muslims.
So the Pharaoh is still there.
So what?
The Pharaoh who tried to kill Moses.
It's also the same Pharaoh in the Quran. Okay? He does not die and get replaced with another Pharaoh, as it is in Exodus. It's not the same Pharaoh that Moses fled from when he goes back to Egypt in Exodus. Right? He hears word, yes, that Pharaoh has died, another Pharaoh. Okay? That's not the case in the Quran. It's the same Pharaoh.
So the Jews have to change everything, including the timing of event.
Yeah.
People who surround Moses in Egypt. So that's a problem now that Muslims should face when they accuse the Torah of being changed and corrupted. In which way? And by the way, there is a one verse out of Hosea 12:12. If you can read it.
Go to Hosea 12, verse 12.
So that's not
you know
Torah.
That book that you always go to in your devotions?
It's 700 years after Moses.
Yeah, so like 700 years after Moses.
Out of
Fled to the land of Aram, there Israel served for a wife, and for a wife he guarded.
Yeah. Let me read that again in case it didn't get in the mic, okay? So 12, verse 12, Jacob fled to the land of Aram. There Israel, that's Jacob, served for a wife, and for a wife he guarded sheep. So he worked for his wife.
So it was wicked Jews who went through the entire Old Testament and trying to find spots about Moses being serving for his wife, according if the original story was like a Quranic, and they replace word name Moses with the Jacob and Hosea 12:12. Like you can do it with the way I find it because I have internet, and right. I type it and I was looking for it. I said like. We talk. I think it will be
maybe back then the Jews already invented the computer, and so they digitized all their Torah scrolls.
They memorized
and then
the
they
entire
searched
Old
it.
Testament, right? So I said, "Oh yeah, remember we have to change that too."
They don't. Now what you have to do is say, there's only one place they can go. It has to be before the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? That's the only thing that they can say. No,
and then we have a problem. Then it means Christ, Jesus, even Muslim Jesus, Isa al-Masih, and his apostles had no idea about the original Torah. They used the wrong Torah. They believe in the wrong Torah, and therefore Quran falsely attribute them to be victorious with knowledge of the truth.
And if you remember the unbreakable chain that we went through yesterday, who had the Torah? John the Baptist. Okay. Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Jesus. Right? And from Moses to Jesus, there were sinless prophets who had the Torah who used it for judgment among the Jews. So they're not corrupting it. So that's the point. They can't actually do that. They're not allowed to do it, but they're going to do it anyway because that's the only thing they've got to try to save Islam, as the Torah must have been corrupted long before Jesus, long before the Dead Sea Scrolls. Otherwise, it's done. Okay? And actually, I want to, because we're talking about Moses, just for the sake of time, we're not going to be able to go through everything, connect it to the story. So we were talking about Moses. Before we do the mixed story, we're going to do another one. We're going to talk about Pharaoh's, the adoption of Moses, we're going to say. Okay? So, because what we said was it was the same Pharaoh that was still living when in the Quranic version, Moses goes back from Midian to Egypt. Okay? What is one of the ways that we know it's the same Pharaoh? Well, let's look at it. And I want you to see, so in your handout it is page 30. But in the Quran, so please pull up on your phones, Surah 28. It's the same Surah. Surah 28. And well, it's verse 9, but let's go just before that, okay? Let's start at verse 7. Okay, so Surah 28, chapter 28. Make sure you're following, guys. This is not a thing where you can just sit and listen and not follow. Okay, so Surah 28, verse 7 and following. We, that's God, inspired the mother of Moses. Nurse him, but when you fear for him, put him then into the river, and do not fear or grieve. We will certainly return him to you and make him one of the messengers. And it so happened that Pharaoh's people picked him up, only to become their enemy and source of grief. Surely Pharaoh, Haman, ignore that for a second, okay, Haman, and their soldiers were sinful. Verse 9, Pharaoh's wife said to him, this baby is a source of joy for me and you. Do not kill him. Perhaps he may be useful to us, or we may adopt him as a son. Who adopted Moses? Pharaoh's wife, according to the Quran. Okay, it's Pharaoh's daughter, obviously, right? Now, if you think about it logically, okay, imagine you didn't really have access to the text of the Torah, and you kind of heard about Moses was adopted, but you didn't remember the details of the story. You just kind of knew he was adopted. Who would you assume adopted him if he was adopted into Pharaoh's household? The wife, not the daughter. Okay? It's Pharaoh and his daughter? Like, that's kind of odd. You have to know the actual story to know what happened. But if you're just kind of logically thinking about it, you're assuming things, the wife makes sense. Okay? This connects to the point that it's the same Pharaoh because when Moses comes back, I don't know if you know the reference off the top of your... Oh, maybe it's here. Maybe it's the one listed I have. 26. Let's see if that's it. 16 to 18. Yes, it is. Surah 26, verses 16 to 18. So the Quran tells the same... difficult thing with the Quran is that it scatters the stories all over the place. So you have bits and pieces of, and sometimes repetitions of the same story with different elements. So in Surah 26, verses 16 to 18. So God is telling Moses at the burning bush, go to Pharaoh and say, we are messengers from the Lord of all worlds. Command to say, let the children of Israel go with us. Pharaoh, now it's funny, it's like he goes from God telling Moses what to go to say to Pharaoh, and then suddenly Pharaoh's speaking. Okay, so it's like now he's actually done it, and Pharaoh's responding. Pharaoh protested, did we not raise you among us as a child? And you stayed several years of your life in our care. So is this the different Pharaoh? It's the same Pharaoh. And it's his family. Right? And he adopted him because his wife adopted him, not his daughter. Okay? And actually, it's funny, in the Quran also, the wife of Pharaoh is like a righteous person. Okay, she's a model of faith. Which is like, what? Okay, so what's very interesting, let's go to New Testament. It's kind of, or you want to?
Before,
yeah, okay.
Somebody read from Exodus to
yeah, sure, we'll do that.
5 to 10.
Exodus 2, chapter 2, 3 to 10.
5 to 10.
5 to 10?
5
okay,
to
sure.
10. Just count how many times wording the daughter of Pharaoh
5, yeah.
you can find and number them.
The phrase daughter of Pharaoh.
Yeah, the phrase.
No, just go and
Tell us.
Just look at it and count it. Verses 5 to 10 in Exodus 2. Here's your group project. You got 5?
times.
Is it mentioned in Exodus that it's a new Pharaoh when he goes back?
Yes.
God said, all who is seeking your soul is dead, or are dead.
And of course, how long was he in Midian? 40 years.
So how many times mentioned the daughter of Pharaoh?
Do you know it? Alex, you want to do it?
I think it's 4.
5.
Is it 5, right? So the Jews have to change 5 times, like specific. It's not like an accident. If you have a 3-letter word and you drop 1 by accident, it became wife, became daughter. So first of all, it's 5 different letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Mm-hmm. So you cannot just drop 1. It will be a totally different word. But then you have to do it consistently 5 places within the same.
Can
phrase.
somebody read out loud verse 6 in their modern English? Exodus 2 verse 6.
When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children."
It's interesting. So it doesn't say daughter of Pharaoh, right? No. Well, you know what some Muslims will say is, well, the Dead Sea Scrolls 1 is fragmentary, fine, okay, and also there are some textual variants. Okay, well, this is great. This verse has a textual variant. Do you know what the textual variant is? You know, because I think we told you. Okay. But you guys know what it is. If you look in your handout, I think it kind of printed it it's pretty faded. Okay, so what you see is, if you can see it, on page 30 in your handout, okay, you have a faded print of the passage in English. Look at the English. Okay, and verse 6, you're going to see the second underlining in red. And it says daughter of Pharaoh, and you'll see it's italicized. That indicates it's a textual variant. So this is not like your modern Bible. This is a translation of the scrolls. Okay, an English translation of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So in the brackets is not what's in the text, it's missing. But there it's outside of the brackets, but it's italicized, meaning it's a variant. And the footnote is number 17. And if you go down to the footnote for the passage, it says 4Q Exodus, that's the name of the scroll that was found in Qumran. And SP is Samaritan Pentateuch, and LXS is the Greek Septuagint. They all say that's what it says, the daughter of Pharaoh, in those manuscripts. But the Masoretic text says, that's the Hebrew later version of it, says she. Look at the big difference. She or daughter of Pharaoh. It's not different. Okay? Because also, what does the Masoretic text have? All the other instances that you counted. 5. There's a 6th time also in the Dead Sea Scrolls, because of textual variants. We have another time that it's mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that daughter of Pharaoh. So, unfortunately, we have so many textual variants that, yeah, like that one. It says daughter of Pharaoh again, right? So this is a great example to use if they try to bring that up. It's like, okay, well, look, the textual variants are like, they're not very significant, but here's that's great. Let's show you an example. Right?
So we have to say, okay, supposedly all the Jews are wicked and they corrupt the Day of Torah, right? Well, what about New Testament?
Yeah, right. Did the Jews convince the Christians to corrupt their New Testament, do you think? Is that pretty reasonable? Especially after because the New Testament has to be written. So after the New Testament, the Jews and the Christians got along really well, right? No, okay. Okay, so let's go to the New Testament. Acts 7, verses 20 and 21. Someone read that out loud. This is, the context of it is Stephen giving his speech before he's about to be killed.
At this time Moses was born, and he was beautiful in God's sight. He was brought up for 3 months in his father's house. When he was exposed, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him out of Esther.
Sorry, wife or daughter? Daughter. That's interesting. Okay, let's go to Hebrews 11. This is, the hall of faith, we sometimes say. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 23 and 24.
By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw that the child was beautiful and that they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's wife. Just kidding. It says God.
That's good. That's good.
Rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the living pleasure.
Yeah, amazing. Alex, you want to say?
Yeah, now everybody corrupt their scriptures. But they have to Christians corrupt their scriptures in all the manuscripts on the planet ever been produced. Like agreeing with Jews, let's do it. And it's all supposed to be done before Moses was born.
Well, that's why I was asking, when did they claim that the Christ...
Before Muhammad was born, you mean?
Sorry.
Yeah, you meant Muhammad, yeah.
500 BC. That's the idea. I give them timing because that's scrolls were written about 200 something BC. So I said, okay, 500 BC, the Jews corrupted the Torah. No Christians ever, apostles didn't know that. Christ never heard about it. They all think they fell back to the original. Well, they thought it's original, but it's been corrupted. Unless finally Muhammad came and Allah gave them all the information correct. But somehow he forgot to tell that in the Quran that all your stories are corrupt. And here's a real one. He said, no, my Quran is confirming your stories. Like, really? That's how we end up on that path of the...
Actually, I'm going to say it has to be more like the 300s BC, because you have the very last books of the Old Testament, like Chronicles, written in the 400s. 400s, yeah. And there are things in Chronicles that have corroborating verses of stuff in the Torah. So that also has to be changed after it was written. So if it was written in the 400, like say 400 BC, it's got to be in the 300s BC, and also because got to be like you got a window here between Chronicles being finished and the Dead Sea Scrolls being written. So that time period, man.
So I want to perfect timing. I also want to spring the gun a little bit, but saying, in order for Quran to be true, so many things to be happened before, like the Jews have to corrupt every single story, remove all evidence from wife of Pharaoh to change to daughter of Pharaoh, heavy lead attributed to Moses instead of, Jacob instead of to Moses, and on and on. There's literally thousands of differences, and how we can do it. But from us, if we're going to say, well, it's a fault on the side of the Quran or Muhammad, it's very simple. It's logical. Because every Muslim believed Muhammad was illiterate. And I said, this is exactly that why. Mm-hmm. Have so many mistakes because of Muhammad was illiterate.
One point.
That's it. One point explains all thousands of differences. So simple.
Now, actually, from there, I'm going to invite Denise. We're going to do another story time. It's okay. So everybody... open or click in your Quran. Okay, make sure you follow along. You really want to follow along. Okay, in Surah 2, chapter 2, now, because a lot of you won't be familiar with it, chapter 2 is very long. Okay, so you're going to still go ways in. Verse 246 Actually, we'll start at 247 to 251. Or let's do 252. Okay, just for fun. Okay, so 247. So chapter 2, verses 247 to 252. Okay, come over to the mic.
Okay.
And the context for this is about King Saul. Okay? The verse before, just to skip over for time, 246 is when it starts, and it doesn't tell you who it is, but it says that the children of Israel approached their prophet, who's unnamed, who's Samuel. Okay, and all Muslims accepted Samuel. They go to Samuel and they ask for a king to be appointed. Okay, so that's the context of the story. So now he's going to present Saul as appointed. That's where it begins. So 247.
So their prophet, which is Samuel, right, told them, God has appointed Saul to be your king. They protested, how can he be our king when some of us are more deserving of kingship than he, and he has not been blessed with vast riches? He replied, God has chosen him over you and blessed him with knowledge and stature. God grants kingship to whoever he wills, and God is all bountiful, all-knowing. Their prophet further told them, the sign of Saul's kingship is that the ark will come to you, containing reassurance from your Lord and relics of the family of Moses and the family of Aaron, which will be carried by the angels. Surely in this is a sign for you if you truly believe. When Saul marched forth with his army, he cautioned, God will test you with a river. So whoever drinks his fill from it is not with me, and whoever does not taste it, except to sip from the hollow of his hands, is definitely with me. They all drank their fill except for a few. While he and the remaining faithful with him crossed the river, they said, now we are no match for Goliath and his warriors. But those believers who were certain they would meet God reasoned, how many times has a small force vanquished a mighty army by the will of God? And God is always with the steadfast. When they advanced to face Goliath and his warriors, they prayed, our Lord, shower us with perseverance, make our steps firm, and give us victory over the disbelieving people. So they defeated them by God's will, and David killed Goliath. And God blessed David with kingship and wisdom and taught him what he willed. Had God not repelled a group of people by the might of another, corruption would have dominated the earth, but God is gracious to all. One more?
Next. Yeah, do the next one.
These are God's revelations, which we recite to you, O prophet, in truth, and you are truly one of the messengers.
Okay, don't go away. So, Denise, anything stand out to you?
A lot.
What's the big one?
I would say the big one is that they wanted to go fight Goliath. That's one of the big ones.
Okay, sure, that's big. Sure.
And that they
said they really doesn't belong. What's the other story?
Oh yeah, the water. That's one of the. Oh, is it Gideon?
There you go. Okay,
yeah.
Why is it Gideon?
Because the lapping up of the water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he brings his army down to the water to test them based on how they drink from it.
Yeah, to see if they scoop or
and what happens as a result?
Yes, we need it.
What happens as a result? Does he have a greater number or fewer number?
Fewer, way fewer.
So what is it in this story?
That he has a lot.
No, he's a lot fewer number also, based on how they drink. Because now they're like, how are we going to face Goliath? We got so few people, we're no match. But we got to remember, what's the principle? God is the one who gives victory. He can save even with a few. And isn't that exactly the same thing in the story of Gideon? He's got too many people to go against the Midianites, narrow it down, okay, so that you don't think you guys won the victory in your own strength. God gives the victory.
Yeah.
Okay, even with a few. What else in it? Do you notice anything else?
To my memory, they were very happy for Saul to be king.
Okay, yes, exactly.
He's like
so
tall and strong.
and you can, if you want to look it up, it's in 1 Samuel 10:24. It gives a response of I'm just telling you for the sake of time, but you can. I think I have it in the notes in there in the handbook. Does somebody have the page number?
26.
26, yeah. So those have your references. Okay, 10:24 gives you the reference for the Israelites' response when Saul is presented to them as the king by Samuel. And it says, and they say, long live the king. So they don't, as it says here in the Quran, they protested. No. So also interesting, what did they protest about in the Quran?
That they were more deserving of being.
They were more deserving, and there's
Yeah.
one more reason.
That he's not rich.
He's not rich. But it says in 1 Samuel 9, verses 1 and 2, that Saul is the son of Kish, who was a wealthy man. So he's from a wealthy family, too. Okay, and then also, it's interesting, it mentions the ark.
Yeah. So I don't remember enough about the ark history when
Okay,
and where,
good.
but that was...
Most don't, okay? So the question I want you to think of is, who captured the Ark of the Covenant from the Israelites?
Philistines.
Philistines, okay, good. Now, when was that? Does anybody know who the judge was at the time?
No.
Before Samuel. Eli, there you go. Okay, because Eli and his two sons were corrupt, and they say, well, let's bring out the Ark of the Covenant, because God will give us a victory, because the Ark's with us. Nope. Okay, so then they all die, and the Ark is taken. That's in 1 Samuel chapter 4. 1 Samuel chapter 5, the Ark is among the Philistines, and it's bringing diseases upon them. And in the temple of Dagon, the idol of Dagon falls over. So they're like, okay, we got to get rid of this thing. Let's send it back. So in chapter 6, they're organizing to send it back. At the end of 6 and early chapter 7, verses 1 and 2, it says that it's brought back to the people of Israel, and it's housed in a place called Kiriath Jearim for 20 years. That's in chapter 7. Chapter 8, the Israelites approach Samuel and ask for a king. But what does the Quran say? The ark will come back to you. And that will be the sign that God was the one who chose Saul. In contrast to your opposition, you say he's not worthy. No, God chose him. He's worthy. Here's how you know. Here's a sign. The ark will come back.
The ark was already back.
But the ark was already back for decades. Okay, so it's a messing up the timeline.
And I think it's also adding the story from Muhammad's experience.
Yes.
It was a battle of Badr.
Yes.
When 300-something soldiers defeated 1,000 Meccans.
I think it's 313.
I think 313, yeah. So, and I think whatever Muhammad put in the story of Saul fighting army with a Goliath, these guys charged the Goliath's army, defeated them, routed them. That's exactly what happened in Muhammad's story, but not in the real story of David and Goliath, or even in the story of Gideon. Nobody charged there, fight them. There's no battle. It's only pursuit but not, in both cases it was pursuit. Yeah. They already lost the battle, they're running away, and Israel's pursued them and kill them, right? But in the story of Quran, they charge, they start fighting and defeat them. It's exactly what happened in the Battle of Badr.
Okay, thanks, Denise. No, that's good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. So yeah, think about that. Again, you got to try to. How are they going to explain the original version of the Torah and Old Testament? And it got to be how it is. So originally, there was no Gideon, and Saul was the one who went down to the river, and he narrowed in his army, and he bravely charged into battle against Goliath with his army. That's what the Old Testament used to say. And then oh yeah, I love it. And David killed Goliath. Right? It's like an afterthought, right? So, but he killed Goliath while Saul is fighting in the battle with the presumably Philistines. Okay, it doesn't say. And you can imagine their commentaries. Once they start saying who it is and all of that, they make even more blunders about it, okay? But this is just the Quran itself. So this is impossible to explain. That's the point. So we don't need to talk about any of the other issues that Christians talk about. Hey, can you imagine? Nobody's talking about this. Why would nobody be talking about it? Because everybody just wants to go right to talk about Jesus. And that's what Muslims want to do, because they'll just attack your belief at that point, criticize it. And from their point of view, like, it makes a lot of sense why they're doing it when they believe what they believe. So I don't fault them for it. But the fault is for the Christians, that we don't approach it in the right way, and we're only thinking about New Testament, and we're not thinking about the value that we have in the Old Testament, and actually also reading the Qur'an. The Qur'an is actually your friend, okay, for reaching Muslims. Because if you just read through the Qur'an, as long as you've read your Bible, okay, learn your Bible well, but read through the Qur'an, and as you read through it, pay attention to two things. Whatever it says, whatever the Qur'an says about the previous scriptures, in particular the scriptures of the Jews and the Torah, and secondly, whatever it says about stories that are parallel to stories in the Bible. Okay? Those are the only two things, really, that you need to pay attention to. And actually, there's so much there, you're never exhaust the mind of stuff that's there. It's amazing. Like, even as we're talking about every thing in the different stories, I'm like, I could tell them all about these things and those things, but we just don't have the time. So what I want to encourage you to see is actually, I actually want to use the analogy Alex came up with. He's like king of analogies, always coming up with new analogies. And way to think of it is kind of like, okay, and I hope this doesn't come off as offensive. I don't think it would to Muslims, because I'm going to use an analogy of slavery. Because actually in Islamic teaching, they are slaves of God, slaves of Allah. And in fact, the Bible says the same thing. We're both servants and we're sons. Okay? So no problem with that. But they especially think like that's perfect, that's appropriate to be called a servant or a slave of God. And so the analogy Alex came up with is kind of like, it's like if you go to a slave market and you have the money to buy the slaves and to set them free.
All slaves.
We have all the money that's needed to buy them all, to set them all free. The wealth that we have is in the scriptures, in the stories. It's all there. We have so much gold we can mine out of it that we can just bring to bear to purchase their freedom. Now, it's up to them what they're going to do, okay, how they're going to respond. But the point is the scriptures are so wealthy. We've got such richness in there. And nobody's even using any of it. They're using all the wrong things in the wrong order. You say, if we just press down into this, that's all we need to do to help really break through, to help them reconsider. And that's all we're trying to do, right? And, for them, they can kind of, going back to what Darcy was asking before, it's like, we can't make them make a decision. We can't, but all we can do is try to take away all the obstacles that are in the way for them to be open to it. And so if somebody's responding, but they're hearing the material, they're okay, and they're not going to follow through with it, that's up to them. Okay? All my job is to present it. Okay? And help them to understand the issues. And if I can see that they're following and they're understanding, and they want to stay in their religion, they don't want to, okay, that's up to them. And that's between them and God. Okay? But now I know I can look back. I've given them the best I've got. I don't regret it. Okay? I didn't say anything offensive. I didn't talk about things that were distractions. I focused on the best arguments and gave them the best information to help them reconsider. And it's up to them. Now I can say, okay, now I can go on to somebody else. And I don't need to also spend, take this story with Nabil Qureshi, David Wood spending years, that's great that he was trying and he didn't have a strategy. So, you're trying your best with what you see there. But should it have taken 3 or 4 years to get through to someone like that? No, it shouldn't. I'd say 3 or 4 meetings or 3 or 4 hours. okay, to lay out the essence of the material. Now, at that point, they can say at the end of a 3 or 4 hour meeting, they don't want to meet again. They don't want to keep the conversation. That's fine. That's up to them. I'm not going to push. Okay, but now they've heard it. And if they're not going to respond to this, are they going to be persuaded by our arguments about the Trinity? I mean, come on. This is it's actually laughable. And that's the point, is I really want you guys to see this. All of the other stuff is a complete distraction and very, very weak. And also, this approach provides a seamless transition from deconstructing the Quran and going into the Bible. If you use like a moral argument, a moral critique, the age of Aisha, like this is the typical stuff that is extremely offensive. Okay, you're not only you're gonna create hostility and defensiveness from them, if they already know it and they're still a Muslim, you bringing it up is not going to lead them out of Islam. So the only way you can reach someone that's from an Islamic background by sharing that information is if they didn't know it, right? Because otherwise they're fine with it, and most Muslims are fine with it.
So only nominal Muslims.
So only nominal Muslims who don't know much are in your potential, range of people that you can potentially reach.
May I ask, have you had people go away, because it's a lot, right? Like when you're like deconstructing their kind of life and belief system, go away and then maybe months or years later come back and say, because they can't forget about that. Like once you know something, you can't unknow it. So do they come back then and say, have a new conversation and say yes, or come back and say, like, I am now a Christian. I've like, thank you for your
Well, I haven't been doing it for that long, only in the last few years, right? Have I met Alex and worked on it and everything? But yeah, I am starting to see that people come back. But yeah, you want to add
one
on,
experience.
Alex? Yeah, go ahead.
The person came back to me 1 year later. And he told, because I give, at that time, it was 2015, I think, I was giving presentation. It's in what they called Adam's House for refugees. So one night I give a presentation of Master Key. It was a little bit different format, but the same message. And next day I was giving the lecture on Global Torah Change Conspiracy, how the Jews supposedly managed to corrupt everything, right? And a year later, this guy approached me through a common friend, and when we met at Westminster Chapel, I asked him specifically, what caused you to leave Islam? He said, on the second meeting, when you show that particular slide, then I knew Islam is not worthy. Like it's all bad. I mean, I think I could use another word, but that's what he said. So for me, like, okay, in the middle of meeting, I know the presentation is like long, but he left in the middle. I didn't know until 1 year later, right? And most of the people I know or meet, or even Greg meets, we meet once or twice max, and we don't know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
But what we have experienced is whatever we show them, they don't know it before. For example, 2 days from now, it will be debate between two, like Christian and Muslim, and it's advertised. And do you know the topic? Did the Prophet preach Tawheed or the Trinity, or oneness of God or Trinity? That's what they debate. And for me, just not only waste of time, it's a waste of opportunity. So instead of talking about the same topic like everybody talks for 1400 years, like, why don't you talk about this? Mm-hmm. Because Muslims, I guarantee that most of the Muslims, 99% of Muslims won't know the difference between Moses' story and Jacob's story, between Saul's story and Gideon's story. And we have tons of that. Let's say you go to the chapter 12 of the Quran, or Surah 12 of the Quran, Yusuf, and you start reading carefully. You remember how many differences Greg found and documented from 98 verses?
For Joseph.
941. Now, they are like some of the bizarre, like really, it's belonged to the Quran and Quran alone. And they are funny when you look through it. And the Muslims don't know. I remember using some of them, and the Muslims were like, I read this story, but I never seen that way.
Yeah.
And it's obvious fault, right? So we show them more than what we go through. That it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of stuff to go through. If we have opportunity, and we'd like to share with Muslims, because without knowing that stuff, there is no reason for them to leave Islam. Objective reason. They could be subjective, and a lot of them living subjectively. But also many Muslims, I met many ex-Muslims, especially online, who left Islam because of the immorality of Prophet Muhammad and whatever. They going to paganism, to atheism, to whatever. They not coming to Christ. And as I was invited to one of the channel I talked to, leader invited me, but the people, as soon as they heard, the ex-Muslims, all of them, that I believe in the Bible, they start attacking Bible. So the point is that guys have to say, guys, please stop it, right? He's here for a different reason. So using moral argument will not promote the Bible.
Yeah, what we've kind of found is when we meet ex-Muslims who've left Islam for the moral reasons, they're typically less open to the gospel. Yeah, they become atheists or agnostics, and they're kind of disenfranchised with all of religion, and that's hard. Now you're kind of trying to say, well, no, but the Bible's different, okay? But now how do you get through to them, right? Well, so actually what our strategy is doing the whole time is we're showing how the Bible's different, right? I don't know, Alex, do you want to go with, do you want to do the Democratic Pharaoh one?
Yeah, we can do.
Okay, do you know what?
Do two stories.
Yeah, let's do that. So open or go in your Quran to chapter 12.
If anybody wants to come and.
Anybody want to come up to do it?
Who doesn't know the story of Joseph from the?
I don't think I did it with you, Pastor Bartley. Maybe.
Anyone who's who haven't heard that before, who never read.
I don't think we did it with you guys.
No.
No. Was it? Yeah. Do you want to come up? You got a Quran. You can. And Surah 12.
We will volunteer you. Okay, we have two stories to go through, but one is a little bit longer, one is shorter.
Yeah.
Sorry, Surah 12.
Surah 12, 45 to 54.
Yusuf.
Well,
sorry,
so
what is it?
I know.
12 what?
45. I think you went too far. 45 to 54. Should be on the next page.
Okay. You want me to read that? That? Finally, the surviving ex-prisoner remembered Joseph after a long time and said, I will tell you its interpretation, so send me forth to Joseph. He said, Joseph, O man of truth, interpret for us the dream of 7 fat cows eaten up by 7 skinny ones, and 7 green ears of grain, and 7 others dry, so that I may return to the people and let them know. Joseph replied, you will plant grain for 7 consecutive years, leaving in the ear whatever you will harvest, except for the little you will eat. Then after that will come 7 years of great hardship, which will consume whatever you have saved, except the little you have stored for seed. Then after that will come a year in which people will receive abundant rain and will press oil and wine. The king then said, bring him to me. When the messenger came to him, Joseph said, go back to your master and ask him about the case of the woman who cut their hands. Surely my lord has full knowledge of their cunning. The king asked the woman, what did you get when you tried to seduce Joseph? Then replied, God forbid, we know nothing indecent about him. Then the chief minister's wife admitted, now the truth has come to light. It was I who tried to seduce him.
So you know, chief minister's wife is Potiphar's wife.
It was I who tried to seduce him, and he is surely truthful. From this, Joseph should know that I did not speak dishonestly about him in his absence, for God certainly does not guide the scheming of the dishonest, and I do not seek to free myself from blame. For indeed the soul is ever inclined to evil, except those shown mercy by my Lord. Surely my Lord is all-forgiving, most merciful. You want me to read 54, you said?
Yes.
The king said, bring him to me, I will employ him exclusively in my service. And when Joseph spoke to him, the king said, today you are highly esteemed and fully trusted by us. Joseph proposed, put me in charge of the houses of the land, for I am truly reliable and adept. Oh, keep going?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah. So, what did you find out funny?
So they're mixing. Sometimes like last time, I'm going through trying to read how it's
okay. Let's go like this. First of all, who decided to like a reaction of the butler according to the biblical story, right?
What was that, sorry?
The cupbearer.
The cupbearer. In the Bible, it's a cupbearer. In the Quran, it's just one guy, unknown, right? When he heard the dreams from Pharaoh, what he proposed to Pharaoh?
Go back to the
in the
beginning.
Quran.
What you read.
What was it? 45.
Yeah. The ex-prisoner.
Finally, the surviving ex-prisoner remembered Joseph after a long time and said, "I will tell you its interpretation. So send me forth to Joseph."
Okay. So what happened? What's in the Bible? You remember the story? Yeah, it was Baker died.
It's similar. There was another prisoner, right?
He remembers, and he said, "I remember my sins today." And he explained Pharaoh. I said, there is a guy by the name of Joseph. He's a Hebrew who foretold us exactly our dreams. So what happened? Pharaoh sent for Joseph. In the Quran, who went for Joseph? Cupbearer. So he's rushing to the prison. Joseph was behind the bars, and then
it should also be noted that it doesn't say at the end of verse 45. It has in brackets, "Send me forth to Joseph." It doesn't say to Joseph.
Exactly.
To Joseph isn't in the Arabic. So the cupbearer never in the Quranic version, he never tells Pharaoh about Joseph.
Before
he says, "I will tell you the dream's interpretation. Send me out." So he doesn't tell him anything. Oh, I forgot to tell you.
Of the prisoner.
The guy interpreted the dreams for me, and I told him I would tell you, but I forgot. Or he didn't say any of that. He says,
so he's saying, "Send me out, but I'll go get it from Joseph," and then.
But it doesn't say I'll get it from Joseph. He's just said, "I will interpret it."
He'll take
exactly. So
the
he
credit.
goes to the prison. Yeah, he'll take the credit exactly.
Okay.
So, because I want you to think where then. So he goes to Joseph in the prison.
Yeah, he says, "Joseph, O man of truth, interpret for us the dream of the 7 fat cows eaten up by 7 skinny ones, and 7 green ears of grain, and the 7 others dry, so that I may return to the people and let them know."
I will come back.
He'll go back. He'll give the interpretation.
And Joseph behind the bars, telling him the interpretation.
"You will plant grain for 7 consecutive years, leaving in the ear whatever you will harvest,"
et cetera, et cetera. So that's now Joseph interpreting the dream while he's in the prison cell to
the cupbearer.
So he's
to the
still in
cupbearer,
prison.
and the cupbearer is going to go relay it to the Pharaoh while Joseph remains in prison. Is that how it happens in Genesis? No. Okay.
It was a Joseph. There was a Pharaoh who told Joseph all the dreams. Before Joseph was put before Pharaoh, he has no idea why he was summoned. Over here, he already tell him story to the cupbearer. Cupbearer goes back to Pharaoh, and then Pharaoh said, "Oh, I heard the news about this guy. I heard this information. Now I want to see this great guy."
Verse 50.
Yeah, then the king said, "Bring him to me." And when the messenger came to him, Joseph said, "Go back to your master and ask him about the case of the woman who cut their hands."
Okay, so don't think about the women yet. But go ahead.
So okay, Pharaoh, almost the god on earth, sending a servant, and he gave a specific order: bring Joseph to me. The soldier or servant goes to the Joseph and said, "The Pharaoh summons you. Let's go." Joseph said, "No, me not going."
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I mean, you could say, well, Joseph get lost of his mind and whatever, like he's playing with the fire. He refused to go. Maybe some people act funny while being in the prison for long. So I want to ask you, what servants should do at that moment?
The guard. What
The
should he
guard.
do? When Joseph says no, not yet.
Oh, he would take him right to Pharaoh.
Yeah. Well, because why? Because Pharaoh gave him order, bring him to me. He didn't say, well, can you just go and ask him if he wants to come to me?
Yeah.
Ask his opinion.
Yeah.
That's not the bring it to me. So the guard should just said, forget it. I didn't ask your opinion. I just follow order of my servant. I'm sorry, of my Lord. But here, suddenly, not only Joseph lost his mind, the servant lost his mind. He goes back to Pharaoh and said he doesn't want to come. Like, questioned what Pharaoh will do to the servant.
Oh, he would have
Exactly.
his servant, and he would have exed.
Yeah, because like you cannot allow people mock your orders.
Yeah. So I got the verse. So come here, you can read it there. This verse. So
that is small.
Okay.
No,
I can read it.
No.
So this is in Genesis
14?
41, verse 14.
Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, so he had to get prepared as well, he came before Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph,
now they're going to interact, and he's going to interpret the dream in Pharaoh's presence.
Yeah, I had a dream, and then there's...
you noted that word, quickly. Brought him out of prison quickly. Yeah. Alex?
So it means there is no time delay. They didn't ask Joseph, do you want to come to Pharaoh? No, they just brought him, pull out, and, go dress yourself. Because that was the order from Pharaoh. But then we have these funny things, which you won't find in the Bible. Joseph said, no, I have to find out about this woman who cut their hands. And you'll be like, what are you talking about, right? Do you know the story from Genesis about women who cut their hands?
No, cut their hands.
While seeing Joseph, no? You should. I mean, come on, guys. That's right there, right, in the story.
Let's read.
Is it? Yeah, let's read
it. So go earlier in Surah 12.
Yeah, where's that?
Okay, and then I think we should do the temptation. But we'll do that after. Okay. Let's go to verse 30.
Verse 30.
It's 30 to 35.
The women in Joseph's beauty?
Yep. So, by the way, this is after the seduction scene. So, after Potiphar's wife in Genesis tries to seduce Joseph, right? So, this is the scene after that.
After the shirt.
After the the shirt comes off in Genesis. So, we might look at that as well, but that's the context.
So, 30 to 35?
Yeah.
Some women of the city gossiped the chief minister's wife is trying to seduce her slave boy. Love for him has plagued her heart. Indeed, we see that she is clearly mistaken. When she heard about their gossip, she invited them and set a banquet for them. She gave each one a knife and then said to Joseph, come out before them. When they saw him, they were so stunned by his beauty that they cut their hands and exclaimed, good God, this cannot be human. This must be, it says good God like that. Good God.
It's a lot.
This cannot be human. This must be a noble angel. She said, this is the one for whose love you criticized me. I did try to seduce him, but he firmly refused. And if he does not do what I order him to, he will certainly be imprisoned and fully disgraced. Joseph prayed, my Lord, I would rather be in jail than do what they invite me to. And if you do not turn their cunning away from me, I might yield to them and fall into ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
So his Lord responded to him, turning their cunning away from him. Surely he is all-hearing, all-knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it occurred to those in charge, despite seeing all the proofs of his innocence, that he should be imprisoned for a while.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's how Joseph gets to prison.
Yikes.
Okay.
Amazing story, right?
Yeah.
Why are we missing from the Genesis? I mean, like, come on, that's an amazing story for the Sunday school, right?
Yeah.
It's like a Magic Mike story.
Wait. That's okay. We don't need to explain the reference.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so question is like, where did Muhammad got this amazing story from? Well, we'll find the source.
Okay, so turn in your handout to page 38. It's almost at the very end. Yeah. Do you want to read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. What is it? This
No, this.
Midrash.
See,
Oh, yeah.
Okay, don't tell them.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to read a passage, and then we're going to explain to you what it is.
All right. Do you want me to read where it's from or no?
Just
Okay.
the passage.
Okay. She commanded her maidservants to prepare.
Sorry, it's under number 7. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. She commanded her maidservants to prepare food for all the women, and she spread a banquet before them in her house. She placed knives upon the table to peel the oranges, and then ordered Joseph. Sorry. And then ordered Joseph to appear, arrayed in costly garments, and wait upon her guests. When Joseph came in, the women could not take their eyes off him, and they all cut their hands with knives, and the oranges in their hands were covered with blood. But they, not knowing what they were doing, continued to look upon the beauty of Joseph without turning their eyes away from him.
Does that sound a little familiar? Okay, well, look where this is. Since we don't have time to go through everything in the handout, I want to show you where we are in the handout. Starting on page 35 is a whole section that this falls under of Jewish legends. This is a Jewish legend. Okay? So what he read from back on that page 38 was from a midrashic source, which is Midrash's Jewish legends, rabbinical legends, from Rabbi Louis Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews. Okay, so it tells this story, which is very interesting, that the Jews came up, invented this story that's not in the Torah, but it finds itself in the Quran. Yeah, you want to comment more, Alex?
So it's funny because Muslims said to me, I think the Jews follow the Quranic story and they make the Midrash. I was like, well, did you read Midrash? Every Muslim I met so far had no idea. Like, we read Midrash with Greg, right? So we know what we're talking about. What they say, usually, it's if it's in the Quran, it's mean the account of Midrash is correct. I said, maybe. But let's see what in Midrash, that story of Joseph and cutting hands, actually placed in. Midrash has about 10 pages.
Like the context.
The context. Midrash has 10 pages of seduction, like different ways. The rabbis just love to talk about this. So when you read all the Genesis, there's just nothing there, right? But rabbis like this way, and she tried that way, she tried this way. And one way, she was so sick of love for Joseph because he's not answering, she felt sick. She lost the color of her face, whatever. And her girlfriends say, what's happened to you? Are you sick? Like what you... And she said, sure, I'm going to show you. Come to me for the banquet. And after that happens, they said, and she said, that's why I'm so sick. And they said, come on, you're the, you can command him.
Yeah.
Like he could lay with you. And she said, no, Joseph is so stubborn, he couldn't. So 1 year later, we have a short incident. In the Quran, it's opposite. The short incident comes first. Then probably Muhammad remembers that, oh, I forgot about that amazing story to tell. So he put the story in the wrong way and the wrong reason, because in the Quran, the woman started gossiping against her. And she tried to teach him a lesson by bringing him to the banquet. And then she you see, you accuse me in falling in love with him while you already fall in love with him. Yeah. You saw him like within a second, right? So the Midrashic account is more logical, which is fairy tale anyway. But it's placed in the wrong account.
I want to let's go to that earlier part. So just read before where we were in the Quran. So Surah 12. Surah 12.
Yeah. What was it? 30?
We're going to read the actual seduction scene.
Exciting.
It is actually. So actually, this should excite you to read the Quran. It's very interesting. Sorry? No. Okay, so it's something. So
where are we going from?
So, yeah. Well, we'll just start at verse 21 to 29.
You want me to read it?
Yep. Go on.
21 to 29?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
I guess they're here. The man from Egypt who brought him said to his wife, who bought him said to his wife, take good care of him. Perhaps he may be useful to us, or we may adopt him as a son. This is how we established Joseph in the land, so that we might teach him the interpretation of dreams. God's will always prevails, but most people do not know. And when he reached maturity, we gave him wisdom and knowledge. This is how we reward the good doers. And the lady in whose house he lived tried to seduce him. She locked the doors firmly and said, come to me. He replied, God is my refuge. It is not right to betray my master who has taken good care of me. Indeed, the wrongdoers never succeed. She advanced towards him and he would not have done likewise had he not seen a sign from the Lord. This is how we kept evil and indecency away from him, for he was truly one of our chosen servants. They raced for the door, and she tore his shirt from his back, only to find her husband at the door. She cried, what is the penalty for someone who has tried to violate your wife, except imprisonment or a painful punishment? Joseph responded, it was she who tried to seduce me. And a witness from her own family testified, if his shirt is torn from the front, then she has told the truth and he is a liar. But if the shirt is torn from the back, then she has lied and he is truthful. So when her husband saw that Joseph's shirt was torn from the back, she said to her, this must be an example of the cunning of you, woman. Indeed, your cunning is so shrewd. O Joseph, forget about this. And you, O wife, seek forgiveness for your sin. It certainly has been your fault.
Now read the next verse to connect us to the banquet.
Some women of the city gossiped, the chief minister's wife.
There you go. So they gossiped about what happened.
Yeah, gossiped about the shirt.
That's very interesting, right? So if you look at this, there are so many differences. Okay, do you want to start us off, Alex?
Okay, first of all, I have...
we have some of the midrash in here.
Yeah, I just wonder, it says he almost fell into her plot, but he saw signs. Like you start guessing what kind of signs you're talking about. Well, you have to go to the midrash to know.
Is that no?
I don't think we have that example.
No? So it said when she tried to seduce Joseph by different means, he almost go to her.
Yeah.
Then he saw vision of father talking to him like, what are you doing? If you're going to touch this woman, your name will be removed from a list of your patriarchs of the Israel. And he said like, oh, sorry. He ran away. Then he had the same desire to go back to her. He went back to her. Then God himself appeared before him. And he said, if you're going to touch that woman, you see the stone I have in my hand? That stone which entire universe is, built, whatever. I will crush the stone. And Joseph get afraid and run away. And she tried to grab the shirt and he tore the shirt from the back. So we have this funny story, colorful story with having signs like visual, which is not in the Bible at all, not in the Torah. It's in the Quran, they just mention it, but you can see why, because that Midrash describes it in the full detail, what happened, 2 visions.
Yeah, just like in the Quran, generally, it's telling mostly is telling us an abbreviated account, right, of the biblical narrative, also of the Midrash, but it's all mixed together. So it mentions the sign, but it doesn't tell you what the sign is. It's just like there's something.
But it's giving us full details.
Is it an overcompensation because he's not allowed to sin? Like
in the Quran?
Yeah, in the Quran.
Well, it says
he would have,
but we show sign.
Yeah,
so he was going to make a mistake, but he didn't.
But he didn't.
Yeah, and actually, so the sinlessness of the prophets in Islam is not really just because of them. It's because God helps protect them. So he intervenes to keep them on the right path. So this would be a perfect example of God stepped in to prevent Joseph from falling into the sin.
To keep the prophets.
To keep him sinless.
Pure.
Yeah, yeah.
Does
Exactly.
the larger Midrash story align with the Bible or the Quran in the idea of, did he get thrown into prison for this, or did Potiphar blame his own wife? Because those are two very different stories. Which way does the Midrash go? Do you know?
Do you want to comment on it?
So in Midrash account, after the incident with the shirt, about 1 year later, incident with the cutting hands
At the banquet.
at the banquet. 1 year later, she tried to seduce him and she grabbed his shirt. Well, it said he left the shirt in her hands and ran away, as in the Bible.
Okay.
And then she
get blamed and imprisoned?
exactly that moment, that day.
But notice this is the reverse order.
Aligns with the Bible.
Exactly.
Yes.
Not with the Quran. Quran makes mistakes.
The key thing, so it's good you're asking the question, so you have to process it. Okay, so, because what Muslims will have to try to do if we bring in midrashic stuff, the legends, they're going to have to say, well, okay, it's not in the Torah, but it must be a true thing, like Alex said, and because it's in the Quran, it must be true. And the midrashic stuff, if it doesn't predate it, then it copied the Quran. So the Jews modeled their legends after what the Quran says. Okay? But the problem, going back to the question you asked before, is that the Midrash, if you think of it like this. The Torah is like a skeleton. The Midrash is extra stories that the Jews, knowing the Torah, told about the stuff in the Bible. So they build their stories on the skeleton of the biblical narrative. So generally, because they don't want to contradict it, right? So they're telling stories generally that they think are align with it. It's like filling in the gaps in the story, the background, extra context. They don't change it, but it's interesting because if you look closely enough at certain things, they end up contradicting it because you can't just add anything, right? But generally, they're basing it like the departure from the text, where they create a whole new backstory. They're creating the backstory for what's in the text. So it's like the flesh built upon the skeleton of the story in the Torah. It's dependent upon the Torah, right? And it generally aligned with it. But the Quran, it's funny because it's not consistent with the Quran.
The Torah.
So the Quran is both inconsistent with the Torah and the Midrash. Okay. Where the Midrash is assuming things in the biblical narrative that are in conflict with the Quranic version. It's assuming it. So actually it's interesting that Midrash ends up being further evidence of corroboration for the Torah because it presupposes the biblical narrative, right? That it departs from and adds extra stuff. It doesn't presuppose the Quranic version. So if you can just show, if you look at the details enough, where you're giving an example where it's presupposing the biblical story in the Midrash, and in what it's presupposing in the biblical story, that's a contradiction with the Quran. Now you can establish, even if we can't date exactly, we can't pinpoint when that Midrash was written down, etc., because there's lots of debate about when exactly things were written. Okay? So what we can show is it's not based on the Quran in so many ways. And when we can show that cuts from under them their ability to say, well, it came after the Quran, is dependent on the Quran. It's not. It's dependent on what the Torah says.
In the Midrash, it said that she grabbed the shirt and she left the house, as in the Torah. And she said, it's in the Midrash said she's waited for her husband to come. When the shirt was next to her, and they said a ripped shirt was with her, which you never find in the Bible. The ripped shirt is not in the Bible. It is in the Quran, as we read it. But what Quran said, as she ripped the shirt from him, they are running to the door, and what happened?
He comes in, right?
What happened when they reached the door in the Quran?
Well, then he walks.
Potiphar or Aziz.
Yeah.
Potiphar came in right there.
Yeah.
So technically, if he would have conceded to her, within a minute, they will be exposed by Potiphar. Yeah. That's not in the Torah and not in the Midrash. Both Midrash and Torah said she has to wait for Potiphar to come.
Yeah.
Hours before.
And because she's waiting, so where is Joseph while she's waiting? Not in the room, right?
Yeah.
But it says in the Quran, she locked the door, right? And he gets to the door, and Potiphar, who's called Aziz in the Quran, is on the other side of the door. So Joseph never exits the room. This is very important because, like I told you, the Dead Sea Scrolls are fragmentary. So we've been looking at it. And it says in multiple places in the fragments of the story of Genesis, 39, when it tells a story of there, he went out of the room, outside. Okay? If Joseph got out of the room in the Torah, the Quran is false. That's it. Because the Quran says he doesn't get out of the room. And he makes a defense before Potiphar? I mean, no. There's no defense. She's, as you said, she's waiting for her husband to come home with the shirt that's not torn, that just came off him, next to her side as evidence. She calls the servants. She tells the servants her story. Then she's still waiting. She's still a long time waiting for her husband to come home. And then she tells her husband, and her husband is like, oh, no, I don't believe you. And like, you're a cunning. All you women are cunning. Okay, you always make up stories. No, that's not what he says. That's what the Quran says, with Joseph in his presence. Okay, and Joseph ends up innocent in the Quran. Whereas this is completely believes her, immediately sent to prison.
In Midrash, actually, the Potiphar sees the reason, he summoned all these judges. They look at the ripped shirt and they said, oh, he's innocent. Mm-hmm. And they decided he saw he's innocent, but yet he said, you know what, I have to put you down into prison because of my name and my wife's name is stained, so please forgive me. That's in Midrash. That's almost in the Quran, because he declared Joseph innocent. It's not in the Torah, which declared Joseph to be guilty and thrown in prison immediately.
Okay, what we're going to do the rest, I'm just going to do open Q&A. Okay, so if you have questions about anything that we've been sharing or anything in the handout, maybe you have questions about practically doing things, could be also any sort of questions you might have. Yeah.
So also saying it's an average of 2 meetings that you have with them, and like that's it?
I would say mostly it's one, okay, with somebody. So that's not because we don't want to meet with them more, okay? It's because we lay it out, and if they have nothing to say or they can't rebut it and they don't want to follow the evidence, they're not going to want to meet again. That's generally what we find. Now, some people do meet. Some people who, especially if they're like more knowledgeable and trained, and they it's not that they really come and they bring more stuff necessarily in rebuttal, but sometimes they'll actually meet for more. Like the more we can meet, the better. Okay, where we can lay out more material, as long as we can keep it on topic, right? That's fine. We have. The topic is the story, the narrative comparison. As long as we can be doing that, that's all we need to be doing. And we can do that almost endlessly. But generally, like people, they hear enough, and it's what are they going to do with it, right?
Well, yeah. So then are you walking with them through that? Because like
they have our numbers, they can contact us.
Through the whole Nabil book story.
Yeah, yes.
So there's a big emphasis on the relationship and how hard it is.
If you have a friend and you can walk through them and you see them, that's fine, that's great. But you can only be friends with so many people, right? So this is really for anybody. You can do this with your friend, and the next time you see your friend, if they give you a signal they don't want to talk about it anymore, Well, now, okay, that's with your friend. All right, they don't want to, they shut down having conversation about that. Let's say the next time you meet, they're like, oh, let's talk about Jesus. No. We go back to this. So if they don't want to talk about that, then we're done talking about that stuff. We're not talking about religion and stuff like that. We're just friends, okay? And if they want to open up and reopen that topic to talk about religion, we go back to where we left off, okay? So I think for someone like Nabil, you could have done that every day, okay? But I don't think it would have taken so many years, okay? So yeah, I'm just saying, so I mean, most people we connect with is not because they are like our next door neighbor or we're like close friends with them already. We'll talk to those people definitely. But for us, we want to act, there are millions and millions of people that, you know, we don't cross paths with naturally. So, and Alex developed this also for the street. So I shared last session, like, you know, we set up a little table with books, Quran Bible comparison, Muhammad was right, free Christian literature, and Muslims, you know, not everybody wants to stop and have a conversation, but some people do. So those people, look, first time we're meeting them, we might have an hour with them, okay, standing there outside talking. And so we can present the essential elements of the 5 points. It's got to be pretty abbreviated to do it in 40 minutes to an hour. But I've done it, and if you learn it well, you can do it. Okay, you're not going to be able to go into the mixed stories, which is the extra stuff we're going to add on, and you can go through all of the story of Joseph, and I mean, all of that, or, you know, Jonah's an amazing one. Okay. Jonah is so fun. You know, yeah, anyway, just...
I have this now, so I got that.
Yeah, now for that, that's not very updated. We need to update that, so it doesn't have everything in it. But if you want more of our resources, please, can somebody maybe pass around a sheet or something where they can share their, if you want to write down your contact info, then I'll reach out to you. We have a WhatsApp chat we can add you into, and that way we can stay connected if you want to be learning more. And I can connect you with online resources we have. That's, yeah, if you just write, maybe like phone number for adding into WhatsApp.
Do Muslim leaders discourage Muslims from reading the Torah?
Generally, yes. I mean, but they don't really need...
If they literally just sat down and read it for themselves, if they know their Quran well, they're going to go, oh, wow.
Well, but what have they been told?
Sure, they've been told that it's been corrupted. Exactly. Right. But even there, you kind of are seeing, like, the biblical accounts are more descriptive, generally, fuller stories.
Yeah. So that's actually funny that you say that, because Muslims always say, well, that's what's so amazing about the Quran is, you know, it only selects the most important information. All the Bible is filled with all this extra, like, irrelevant, unnecessary detail. Okay? I say, okay, no, that's amazing. Okay? It's amazing because, so what you're saying is, you know, if they're being difficult about it, I'll just kind of say, well, like, okay, so, yeah, like, detail's not important, because they'll say, like, the details don't matter, it's what's generally, okay? Okay, so detail doesn't matter, so, like, the details in the Quran don't matter, right? Okay? Because in the Quran, detail in the Quran doesn't matter, right? They can't say that, because anything in the Quran, it's Allah's speech, okay? So that means... Okay, fine, it's selective. Well, it's also funny because it adds so much stuff that's not in, like the cutting of the hands is not very selective. It's adding a whole thing that's not in there at all, right? So it's not really just that. But that's fine. All I would say is, all I need is the details, the specific details that the Quran mentions, and parallel. I don't need any of the extra detail in the Bible, even. So I think that we need to impress upon Christians is you don't defend everything. Just defend only the things that are absolutely necessary. So if they're going to push, oh, well, this other thing in the Torah, well, it's not parallel. Well, it's not parallel. We're not talking about it. We only talk about parallel things because that's only stuff we can set by side. And if maybe the Quran is, let's say, just hypothetically, let's say it only gives 50% of one part of the story. Okay, so the other 50%, if they're saying, well, that's not okay, fine, we don't talk about it. We got 50%. How many differences do you think are going to be in that 50%? A lot. Okay, I mean, if it's 9.6 differences per verse in the Joseph story, I need one verse. Okay, and I have a lot to talk about. So yeah, the detail is kind of interesting. Go ahead, Eric.
When you think about the timeline of the Torah and Dead Sea Scrolls and the life of Muhammad and the Qur'an, how do you understand that the Qur'an is, what's its sources? What do you think the sources are? How did it actually get written, and why is it so different from all?
Yes, so the answer to that is the Midrash, especially, right? As we were just starting to show you at the end. So that's a question that they often ask us. So we'll go through the master key, which is those 5 pillars we deconstruct. And then sometimes they're kind of like, okay, so what do you think the Quran is? Okay, well, that's a really good question. So now we can start showing them midrashic elements, right? So let's just, I want to use one more example because it's a very good one, is the gates. So in, if you turn in your handout to page 38, and in the Quran, it's chapter 12. So again, it's Joseph. In fact, in the last section on Midrash, we have 10 examples just from the story of Joseph that are from Midrash. And I guess there's more because I don't think we included the sign in there that you're mentioning. So Surah 12, verse 67. So if you look at that, so usually this is what we'll read it, and then we'll ask them a question. Okay, it's just the Quran. So 67, 68. He then, so this is Jacob. Jacob is directing his sons who have returned from Egypt. Now they're going to go back to Egypt again from Canaan. So Jacob is saying, he instructed them, O my sons, do not enter the city all through one gate, but through separate gates. I cannot help you against what is destined by God in the least. It is only God who decides. In him I put my trust, and in him let the faithful put their trust. Then when they entered as their father had instructed, this did not help them against the will of God whatsoever. It was just a desire in Jacob's heart which he satisfied, etc. So there's no more context to this. So the question we ask, why do you think Jacob gave this advice to his sons to not enter through the same gate when they enter Egypt, but go through separate gates?
So it's harder to identify them?
There you go. Good explanation. It's harder to identify them.
What kind of harm could come their way if they will be identified?
Well, Joseph or his
brothers,
I guess people would, I don't know.
Any other explanations people can come up with?
Yeah, why would they not want to be identified?
He was afraid of something, right? It doesn't say in the Quran at all. And it's not in the Bible, not in the Torah, right?
Okay, so let's read it. On page 38, it's the point number 8, under Midrash. Bottom of the page, 38. As he, that's Jacob, knew that they were likely to attract attention on account of their heroic stature and handsome appearance. Okay, actually, the Midrash is really funny. So in light of that, he cautioned them against going to the city altogether through the same gate, or indeed showing themselves altogether anywhere in public, that the evil eye be not cast upon them. The evil eye. That's in the Torah, right? Now, let's see if I can blow this up big enough for you guys. Okay. So here we have, this is a commentary on the Quran by, it's called Tafsir's commentary, Al-Jalalain. Jalalain was a commentator. He's talking about this verse in the Quran. It says, he said, O my sons, do not enter Egypt by one gate, but enter by separate gates, lest the evil eye smite you. There. Not in the Quran, but it's in the Islamic commentaries. The Quran and the Islamic commentaries both come from Midrash. Is the point.
And you know why it came from Midrash? Why Midrash is well called preeminent before the Quran and Tafsir? Not only that, it's the Muslims say, well, it's Jews copied from a Quran, or whatever it's in the Quran is actually true in the Midrash. Well, here's something I'd like you to go with homework. If you go to the same chapter 12 and you read from verse 58 to verse 90, I will ask you to identify how many trips brothers did to Egypt according to Muhammad. So, but I want to show you one thing. Whatever it's in the Quran, it's said about don't enter from the same gate. It's actually trip number 2. Before they go back with Benjamin, supposedly, brother is not named in the Quran, but we know it's Benjamin. Father cautioned them not to go through the same gate. Well, I ask you why he should have said before the first trip, right? That makes sense. But the Quran is second trip, before second trip. We go to the Midrash, and it's exactly the first trip it's supposed to be, logically. It's all fake story. It's all wrong, right?
Is the first story? Is the first trip before the first trip in the Midrash, as in the Torah, as in Genesis.
But in the Quran, it's the second.
It's the second. Yeah.
So you cannot caution them at the before second trip because they already been cast evil eye.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just tell them. Okay. So, do you remember in Genesis on the first trip to Egypt, the brothers go down to Egypt the first time? Who is held in custody when they leave? No. Benjamin isn't there on the first trip. You have to go back to get him. Which brother? One of the brothers is held in custody.
Hostage.
Simeon, thank you. Got it. Okay. In the Quran, who do you think is held in custody? Nobody. Point is, Muhammad forgot. So the first trip, nobody's in custody. Remember how Joseph treats his brothers in Genesis? He accuses them of being spies. Okay? So they're not trustworthy. So now he's like, okay, go bring Benjamin back, then he'll know. Okay? And he puts the money in their bags, which is like they discover on their way back, right? Halfway back, one of them opens their bags and they're like, oh, like this is bad, okay? Because they're being accused of being spies and now they're stealing. Okay, the thief aspect. They get home and they all have money. So now, how do they feel? They're gonna want to go back now? Okay, good. In the Quran, he doesn't accuse them of being spies. And he does put the money in their bags. Why does he put the money in their bags? As an encouragement to come back. They open their money not on the way home at the lodging place. They open it when they all get home, all together. They open their bags and they find the money and they say, oh, amazing. Now we can go back and we can buy even more food. Okay? And nobody's held in custody. So this is funny. So the point is, the first trip, he forgot to put Simeon in prison and forgot to have him accuse them of being spies. Or maybe that's just not consistent enough with him being a prophet. But he forgot to put Simeon in prison. And then it's interesting because then, and also the incentive is with the money, which is the opposite in the Genesis narrative. So then, now in the Quranic narrative, he says, don't go through the same gate.
On the second trip.
Before the second trip. So that's not the timing, because the Midrash has it before the first trip, which is the logical thing. Before you go down to Egypt, okay, make sure when you go down to Egypt, don't go through all together. Okay, lest the evil eye be cast upon you. Well, I mean, how is the Midrash based on the Quran? It's not. The point is, Muhammad retold the story that he heard from the Jews that included the Midrashic elements like the evil eye, and he forgot to put it in the first trip. So he put it before the second trip, just as he forgot to put Simeon in prison. That's why somebody stays behind in the second trip in the Quran. Okay? Not put in prison exactly, but he's like, I'm not going to go back, so he stays behind. And then there's a third trip in the Quran, which is not in the Bible. So in Genesis, the brothers go down 3 times.
2 times.
Genesis, sorry. 2 times. Let's say that again. Genesis, they go down twice. In the Quran, it adds a third trip. Okay? And it's funny, the second trip in Genesis, he reveals his identity. In Genesis, he reveals it to everybody, right? It's the second final trip. In the Quran, the second of 3, he reveals his identity to Benjamin only, separate from his brothers. Okay? And then the brothers go back, and they come back again, and then he reveals his identity.
That's an interesting story, because Benjamin's held in prison by Joseph, supposedly, and the brothers are coming back to to Canaan without Benjamin, telling his father, Benjamin has stolen, and he's there. And father said, go back and find Joseph and Benjamin.
Yeah.
Can you tell me why it's mission impossible according to Genesis? Why they definitely cannot come back without Benjamin and tell father Benjamin is like in the prison in Egypt? Why? Do you remember? What was the main reason?
Of Rachel. Yeah.
What's that?
The reason why, according to the biblical account, there's no way for them to go back without Benjamin home. And what was the reason? Because in the Bible, father refused to send Benjamin with them. He said, I will die if something happened to him. And I don't care about Simeon, right? Let him rot in the... Who cares? Me not sending this young boy, because he's the last one from Rachel.
Yeah.
Joseph is dead. So, and then finally Judah, it was Reuben who said, kill my 2 sons. He's like,
if I don't bring them back, yeah.
You're like kidding me, right? Shut up. They stay until there's no food. And father said, why don't you go back to Egypt? He said, Father, come on. We can't go back without Benjamin. Oh, I can't let them die. Oh, well, if you're going to keep them, we're going to all die. And Judah came in and said, I will be responsible for the rest of my life, whatever. And finally, he said, okay, take care. Like, take the Benjamin. They go back with Joseph, and eventually Benjamin been accused of being stolen the cap. But in the Quran and the Midrash, both Benjamin knew it was a plot. It was a funny. So he was like, whatever. But brothers didn't know. In the Quran, in the Bible, he didn't know. He was like, what did I do? But he didn't say anything. So they came back with Benjamin as a thief to Joseph. And he said, you know what? I'll keep Benjamin. You go home. No problem with you. And Judah said, we cannot go back home without him. I better stay instead of him. You let him go. That's why Joseph revealed himself, because he saw opposite reaction what brothers sold him to Egypt.
Yeah, and it was Judah's idea in Genesis to sell him.
And Judah now standing and saying, I'm not going to let
his brother, Benjamin, be...
Because if father will see us without him, he will die. So we cannot go home. There's no way we can go home. Mm-hmm. In the Quran, sure, no problem. Let's tell them, Benjamin is in prison. Okay, so sad.
Okay, we have to wrap up. I'm just going to read these two verses to close us, actually, from the Quran, because you were asking kind of like where it comes from. So we show them this. These verses are listed at the beginning of the section in your handout on Midrash. Okay, so this is from Surah 25 and verses 4 and 5. So the Quran actually tells us the explanation, where the Quran really comes from. Okay, it's there because it records for us what did the people in the time of Muhammad think about the Quran, that the people who rejected it, what did they think? Okay, so it says, the disbelievers say this Quran is nothing but a fabrication which he made up with the help of others. Their claim is totally unjustified and untrue. And they say these revelations are only ancient fables which he has had written down, and they are rehearsed to him morning and evening.
Right there.
You see? In other words, it's Midrash. It's Jewish legends. You know, it's of course, and it's also not confirming the legends. It's also inconsistent with the legends. Okay, the cutting of the hands, all these, the gates, which gate. Okay, so it shows you when you look at that stuff, the Midrash is not based on the Quran. The Quran comes from a distorted retelling of all of it. Actually, what I would say, just the final thing to say is, if you think about it, this is not just bad memory on the part of Muhammad. Sometimes, like maybe the order of the trips and stuff is bad memory. But I'm going to actually say the Jews told it to him wrong, intentionally. If you think, especially the one that's like, absolutely, I think you'll get it, the Saul and Gideon story. There is no way someone would accidentally, hearing both of those separate stories, mix it in that way, by accident. There's no way. You told your kids those two stories before they could read. They didn't mix them together, I'm sure, in that way. Okay? So, that means you have to have people who knew the stories, the actual version, and mixed them together intentionally and told it to him wrong. And he, because he's illiterate, he can't go and check it himself. Now, what is the motive for it? Is because the rabbis, who we believe knowledgeable Jews are rabbis, infiltrated Muhammad's movement, and they told him the stories, some of it distorted intentionally and so on, some of it bad memory, etc. Why did they do it? To safeguard the Jewish community from assimilation into Islam. Because the Jews who knew the stories would hear the Quranic version and be like, what on earth is this? It is, notice what they say. They don't say the scriptures of the people of old. They say the legends of people of old. They don't say this is coming from the scriptures. Or, you know, Christians often say that the Bible, the Quran plagiarized the Bible. It's not plagiarized. Plagiarism requires that you know the original and you intentionally copy stuff from it. This is not plagiarism. This is somebody, the only way you can explain it is if Muhammad was illiterate, he couldn't check it, he has help, as it says, has helped to have it written down, and he's hearing the stories told to him by others who know the original versions and are distorting it. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, well, thank you for your time. Maybe I'll just close this in prayer, and then we can head off. I don't know if we have to all leave. I know you guys have to go, but just let me know, and we're willing to stick around to chat with people if we want. But some people are on a schedule. So, Heavenly Father, thank you for this time we can spend together these past two sessions. Thank you for Renewed Church for hosting us. Most of all, Lord, while we've had some fun and looking at stories, all of this has just highlighted for us that there are many people who just don't know the truth. And our hearts break for them. We want them to come to know the true Word of God in the Torah, in the Tanakh, in the New Testament even, that you would help us share this information with them would you use it to open their eyes, and would you give us hearts that bleed for them, not that look down on them, not that mock them or make fun of them. It is in a way no fault of their own that they believe that the book that they read and they recite and they hear is from God. We just ask that you give us those opportunities to help them to see that it even doesn't stand up to its own claims, that they might hear out the true word of God, and give us wisdom how we do it, and grace and gentleness and patience as we work through learning the material and then laying it out for those who we would love to call friends and also ultimately brothers and sisters in Christ. We pray that you use all of us here to be lighthouses in our neighborhoods and the spheres of our influence, and would you lead people along our path that we could share with them the life-transforming and life-saving truth of the Scriptures. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.